Hi, I'm Emily. Coming back to my hometown after college should have felt comforting, but stepping into my late father's house felt more like entering a cold, unfamiliar place. My stepdad Paul, his wife Susan, and their kids Mark and Lucy had turned the house into something I barely recognized. The warmth and happiness that once filled the house were gone, replaced by a heavy, uncomfortable silence that felt like it was choking me. "Make sure you clean up after yourself. We don't need more mess around here," Susan said sharply as I pulled my suitcase toward my old room. Lucy stared at me like I was some unwanted guest, whispering just loud enough for me to hear. "Why is she even back? Didn't she get the message to stay away?" Mark didn't even bother pretending to be nice, sneering as he walked past me. "Guess college didn't work out, huh? Came crawling back?" It hurt. These were supposed to be the people who were my family. My dad had married Susan after my mom died when I was just a child. He always hoped Susan and I would get along, and that her kids would be like siblings to me, but after he died suddenly last year, any sense of family disappeared with him. I mostly kept to myself, spending time in my room or hanging out with friends, but the more I tried to avoid problems, the more they pushed me out. They moved my things from shared spaces, threw away my food by accident, and made sure I felt like a stranger in my own home. One evening, when I came back from a walk, I overheard Paul and Susan talking in the kitchen. They didn't notice me standing just outside the doorway. "She has no clue about the will," Paul said. "As far as anyone's concerned, everything went to you and me." Susan's voice was cold and calm as she replied, "Let's keep it that way. The less she knows, the better. We can't afford any trouble." Trouble? My father's will? They were hiding something important. The truth hit me hard. Not only did they not want me here, but they were also trying to keep me from finding out something that might actually belong to me. That night, lying in my old bed, surrounded by boxes I hadn't unpacked, because I never felt at home, I made a decision. I couldn't stay here any longer, not with them. I started planning my escape. I didn't know where I would go, but I knew I had to leave. The next morning, I met my best friend Jamie at the local cafe, and we looked through rental listings. Jamie placed a comforting hand on mine and said with a smile, "You know you can always stay with me until you find a place." "Thanks," I replied. "I might just do that," I replied, trying to force a smile. It was a huge relief to know I had at least one ally in this town. The coffee shop buzzed with the lively chatter of people starting their day, a stark contrast to the suffocating silence at Paul's house. Here, I could breathe. Here, I could think. As I sipped my coffee, a plan slowly began to take shape in my mind. I needed to uncover what they were hiding about my father's will. But first, I had to secure a new place, a safe space where I could regroup and prepare for whatever was coming next. Moving into my tiny apartment felt like stepping into a completely different world, a small, cramped world, but it was mine. The freedom was thrilling, even though the financial pressure was real. I scraped by with an online business, selling handmade crafts I'd started making as a hobby. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning, a step towards something bigger, something that belonged to me. One chilly morning, while updating my online store, I remembered something my dad used to say: "Always carve your own path. No matter how tough it gets, keep your chin up and push forward." His words felt like a soothing balm to my tired spirit. He had always been my source of strength, teaching me how to be resilient when life threw challenges my way. With his advice echoing in my head, I knew it was time to deal with the situation at the house. I needed answers, and there was only one place I could get them. I made an appointment with my dad's lawyer, Mr. Thompson, hoping he could help me figure out what was really going on. Sitting across from him in his office, surrounded by the scent of old books and leather, I felt a mix of nervousness and hope. "I've been wondering about the house," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have concerns about how things were handled after my father passed." Mr. Thompson adjusted his glasses and pulled a thick file from his desk drawer. "Well, Emily, according to your father's will, the house was left entirely to you." The room seemed to spin as I processed what Mr. Thompson had just told me. "The house belongs to me?" I managed to say, still in shock. "Paul may have had other ideas," Mr. Thompson replied calmly, "but your father was very clear in his intentions. Here, take a look for yourself." He handed me a copy of the will and pointed to a specific clause. My hands trembled as I read it, seeing my father's words written out, a clear confirmation of what should have been mine all along. The drive back to my apartment was a blur of emotions: anger, relief, determination, all swirling inside me like a storm. I thought about the days I'd spent with my dad in our backyard, him teaching me how to negotiate, how to stand my ground, and never let anyone push me around. "You've got to stand tall, Emily," he would say, no matter what. Armed with the truth and my father's lessons, I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about exposing Paul for the liar he was and for dishonoring my father's memory. That night, I began gathering everything I needed: evidence of Paul's deceit, proof of my rightful claim to the house, and a plan to confront him. I reached out to a few of my dad's old friends who might support my case, and I started documenting everything. I also called Susan, hoping to gauge whether she was aware of what Paul had been doing or if she was involved. Her guarded tone and evasive answers only made me more determined. "Things aren't always what they seem, Emily," she said cautiously, with a trace of unease in her voice. "No, they're not," I replied, my voice hardening, "and soon, everyone will see things for what they really are." As I hung up, a mixture of nerves and resolve settled over me. This wasn't just about fighting for a house. It was about defending my father's legacy, and I was ready. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I went through boxes of my dad's old papers, finding receipts, emails, and letters that hinted at just how deep Paul's deception ran. Every piece of evidence was carefully organized and catalogued, building my case bit by bit. One evening, while sifting through a box labeled tax documents, I found a letter from a family friend, Mr. Henderson, addressed to my father. The letter detailed a conversation with Paul, where Paul had openly stated his plan to convince everyone that the house should belong to him and Susan after my father's passing. It was the smoking gun I needed. The next day, I met with Mr. Henderson, who was more than willing to provide a sworn statement recounting his conversation with Paul. Armed with this new evidence, I called my cousin Alex, who specialized in real estate law. We met at a small cafe downtown, where I laid out everything I had uncovered. "Emily, you have a strong case here," Alex said, reviewing the documents. "Based on this, Paul's actions could easily be considered fraud. You have rights, and we can fight to enforce them." With Alex's help, we drafted a formal letter to Paul, asserting my legal claim to the house and warning him of the consequences if he continued with his dishonest tactics. It felt incredibly empowering to finally take decisive action, knowing I was on solid ground. But the real turning point came when I decided to confront Susan directly. If she truly didn't know the full extent of Paul's schemes, she deserved to. One afternoon, I invited her to meet for coffee, hoping that in a neutral space, we could talk openly. "Susan, I found something troubling in my father's documents," I began, carefully watching her reaction. "There are inconsistencies in what Paul has told us about the house. According to my father's will, the house was left to me, not to Paul. I have the documents to prove it." Susan's face turned pale, her eyes flickering with a mix of surprise and confusion. I had no idea," she stammered. "Paul told me the house was left to both of us, to secure our future." "I understand this is hard to hear, and I'm not trying to start a conflict," I said, keeping my tone calm but firm. "But you deserve to know the truth. I think Paul has misled both of us." Susan was silent for a moment, then slowly nodded. "I need to think about this, Emily. If what you're saying is true, I need to reassess a lot of things." As we parted, I sensed a shift. Susan's reaction was exactly what I had hoped for, a crack in Paul's lies that could bring everything down. Walking back to my apartment, my resolve hardened. This was no longer just about reclaiming my father's house. It was about justice and making sure my father's wishes were honored, ensuring that deceit wouldn't win. The day of the confrontation felt like the climax of a storm that had been brewing for months. I had everything prepared, the evidence neatly organized in a folder, testimonies from key people, and most importantly, the support of my friends and family. I invited Paul, Susan, and their kids over under the pretense of discussing family matters. As they settled into the living room, the tension was thick. I began, "Thank you all for coming. There's something important we need to talk about regarding my father's house and his will." Paul scoffed, his arrogance clear. "Here we go again, Emily. What now? More accusations?" I didn't flinch. "Not accusations, Paul, facts." I laid out the documents on the coffee table: my father's will, the letter from Mr. Henderson, and legal assessments. According to these documents, confirmed by multiple legal advisors, this house was left to me, not to you. "Paul, you've been lying to everyone." Susan's eyes darted between the papers and Paul. "Is this true, Paul? Did you lie about the will?" Paul's calm exterior cracked, his voice rising in desperation. "It's not like that, Susan. I did it for us, For our future. But Susan wasn't buying Paul's excuses. Her expression hardened as she fully turned to face him, her decision clear in her eyes. Lying about this? What else have you lied about, Paul? I can't do this anymore. She stood up, taking Mark and Lucy by the hands. We're leaving. I need to think about what's best for the kids and me. As they walked out, leaving Paul to deal with the mess he'd created, I felt a wave of mixed emotions. There was a sense of vindication for myself, but also sorrow for Susan and the children. In the weeks that followed, word of Paul's deceit spread quickly throughout the community. He didn't just lose his family, his reputation, once built on the image of a respectable family man, was in ruins. Socially ostracized and isolated, he faced the consequences of his actions. Meanwhile, I moved back into the house, the one that had silently witnessed so much of my life. As I unpacked, I came across a box of old letters and photos, memories of my father. Each one reminded me of his love and presence. It was in this home, filled with echoes of the past, that I truly realized what I had reclaimed. I didn't just make the house my home, I turned it into a space for community and healing. The business I'd started out of necessity grew and flourished, and I began hosting workshops to help others who were fighting their own battles against deceit and manipulation. Standing in the newly renovated living room, now alive with laughter and conversation from a local support group meeting, I felt a deep connection to my father's legacy. This house, once a place of conflict, was now a sanctuary, a place of healing and strength. This victory wasn't just about winning back a house or defeating a deceitful stepfather. It was about reclaiming my life, honoring my father's memory, and building a future on the values of integrity and resilience he had instilled in me. And that brings us to the end of the story. Now, I have a question for you. If you were in Susan's position, would you have made the same choice to leave Paul after discovering the truth? Or would you have tried to find another solution? What would you do differently, and why? I'm really interested to hear your thoughts, so please share them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Your support means a lot and helps keep these stories coming. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to read your responses.
Tony sat in a chair against the wall, looking at his father, who was lying with his eyes closed, his face thin and haggard. The atmosphere in their house had been dreary for over 3 weeks now, ever since Tony's father had become bedridden. The diagnosis was serious and time was running out. As soon as Howard's illness became known, his mother pleaded with the doctors, saying, "We'll pay any money. Just save my husband. How much do you need? Let's send him abroad. I'll go with him and take care of him." Tony was unsure about the exact amount of money in their family accounts, but he knew there was a substantial sum. His father had been the head of the publishing business for many years. Normally stern and energetic, Howard was now lying with his eyes closed, as if peacefully sleeping. But Tony knew that his father purposely closed his eyes whenever he entered his bedroom. Not wanting to worsen the already difficult situation, Tony silently stood up and left. He understood as soon as his father opened his eyes, even with his last bit of strength, he would express his displeasure at his presence. This had been the case the previous morning. Howard audibly complained when he saw Tony sitting nearby, saying, "Why are you looming here like an eyesore? Take an example from your older brother Vincent. He studies every day, attends all his classes, and you're idle. Go away. Disappear from my eyes." Those words had hurt Tony deeply. Only he knew that his older brother Vincent hadn't attended the college for over 2 months and spent his spare time in clubs. Vincent would come to their father in the morning, but after an hour or even less he would disappear, claiming he had to study. Tony heard how affectionately his father spoke to Vincent and how angrily he spoke to him. At times, Tony felt accustomed to such treatment. Since childhood, he had been the scapegoat for everyone in the family. He was blamed for all troubles and failures, regardless of whose fault it was. His father only referred to him as a slacker and a troublemaker. His brother also treated him like an enemy. Occasionally, when his mother was in a good mood, she would pity him or say a kind word after his father scolded him. On the contrary, his parents always held Vincent up as an example. Tony couldn't understand why. Tony studied diligently and got every grade deservedly, while Vincent just had to attend lessons to bring home a diary with A's and B's. Howard regularly sponsored school for Vincent's good grades. His brother was 2 years older than Tony, and as soon as he graduated from school, Howard immediately took care of it, and in a couple of weeks, Vincent became a student of one of the best colleges in the city. Upon Tony's graduation, his father angrily declared, "That's it. Stop relying on your parents' support. Go to work. And if you have enough brains, go to a correspondence college." That was Tony's plan as well, but his dreams of further education quickly faded into the background. A few months after his graduation, the family learned about Howard's illness. Tony had to put aside his goals and start helping his mother. There was enough money in the family to hire a nurse, but his father adamantly refused, saying, "I deserve my wife and sons to take care of me, not some strange people." Most of the time, Howard's wife took care of him. Tony would often assist her, which would provoke the patient's dissatisfaction and anger. Together with his mother, he would wash his father, change the bedding, clean the room, and even learned to administer injections. Vincent, on the other hand, would only visit every day to sit by his father's side holding his hand. But that wasn't the only reason. Twice, Tony overheard from another room that his brother, taking advantage of their father's favourable disposition, asked him for help. The first time, he tearfully pleaded, "Dad, the car you gave me when I finished school is no longer in good condition. It's constantly breaking down. Besides, do you know whose kids are studying in my class? The daughter of the city's head, the daughter of the market director, the son of the head doctor at our hospital, and others. They all come in fancy cars, some even with drivers. And here I am, driving that damn car. Since you're bedridden anyway, and your car is just sitting idle in the garage, could you give it to me? I have to maintain my family's status, don't I?" Tony hadn't heard the answer, but when he saw Vincent go out in their father's car that evening, he knew that his brother had achieved his goal. A week later, Tony was giving their father an injection when Vincent entered the room. Grudgingly, Vincent said, "Well, if you have already done your job, get out of here. I need to talk to my father." Tony left the room, but his curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to eavesdrop on their conversation. It turned out that Vincent's college arranged a week-long exchange trip abroad, and Howard, impressed by his son's enthusiasm for learning, allocated a considerable sum of money for it. Tony, who already heard that Vincent had abandoned that college, couldn't understand why his brother needed a large sum. However, everything fell into place when he overheard Vincent talking on the phone. "Baby, pack your bags," Vincent joyfully exclaimed. "As soon as I leave my father's house, we'll fly to those islands you always dreamed of visiting." At that moment, Vincent noticed Tony and realised he had heard everything. He put the phone in his pocket, approached his brother and hissed, "What are you looking at me like that for? I have the right to a holiday, and my father doesn't mind paying for it. It doesn't matter what it's for, as long as it benefits me. So don't you dare say a word. Go and change his diapers. Better." Tony was stunned by his brother's audacity. While their father lay dying in the next room, Vincent was planning a luxurious vacation on islands with his lover. "But our dad could die at any moment," Tony whispered. Vincent's reaction was chilling. He grinned and defiantly looked into Tony's eyes as he said, "Don't worry. By the time the will is announced, I'll definitely be back. After all, if he dies, the inheritance won't be received the next day." Leaving Tony in a state of confusion, Vincent turned and walked away. It was then that Tony realised that his brother had no genuine concern for their father's health. All the sadness and tears at their father's bedside were merely an act to secure the biggest share of the inheritance. A couple of days after Vincent's departure, their father passed away quietly at night, with Tony on duty at his bedside. This moment would be etched in Tony's memory forever. His father opened his eyes and looked at Tony with a kind and affectionate gaze for the first time. It was as if he wanted to say something, but after a few deep breaths, he fell silent. Tony immediately sensed that something terrible had happened. He woke up his mother, taking a sedative from the kitchen on the way, as she had been relying on them heavily lately. Sobs, farewells and funerals followed. Throughout this time, Tony never left his mother's side, while Vincent continued to enjoy his leisure on the seashore, not bothering to return for the funeral. He only returned when several days had passed. He visited his father's grave only once, and that was at his mother's insistence. Life remained unchanged for him, and he even claimed to have more freedom of action. He could access cash in the safe without his father's approval, use his car whenever he wanted, and answer to no one. His mother didn't ask any questions. After her husband's death, she didn't care about such matters anymore. On the day of their father's scheduled will reading, all the family members were summoned by the notary. Vincent arrived in high spirits, smirking at Tony, as if he already knew the content of the will. As for Tony, he had no illusions, but what he learned from the notary was beyond any expectations. Their father's real estate and movable assets had been divided completely, in his opinion, unfairly. The house they all lived in and the monthly maintenance had been bequeathed to his wife for life. Tony fully agreed with this part of the will. To his eldest son, Vincent, their father left the management of all accounts, businesses, multiple cars, and a spacious apartment in the downtown. When it was Tony's turn, everyone held their breath, as it seemed that there was nothing more left for him. A tense silence filled the room, with Tony hearing his brother's laughter. The notary adjusted his expensive spectacles and read more quietly, revealing that their father had left Tony a stable with a small cottage located far outside the city, along with a sum of money in his account that was sufficient for him to start an independent life. When Tony heard how much his father had left him, he couldn't believe it. The number of zeros in his older brother's inheritance was many times more, and the money that had been left to Tony, his brother, could probably be squandered in clubs in less than a month. Tony, of course, from the very beginning realized that Dad would not divide everything equally between the sons, but he certainly did not expect him to act so unfairly. Going out of the notary, Vincent, who had always considered his younger brother as insignificant, angrily sneered through his teeth. "Well, that's it, my dear little brother. As they say, go your own way, and I hope I never see you again. By the way, don't even try to ask me for anything. I'm sorry, but I don't give to beggars." Turning to his mother, he said, "Mum, are you coming? Hurry up. I've got many things to do. I'll drop you home quickly, and I want to celebrate my current status as a rich businessman." Playing with the keys of his car, which had already become officially his, he headed towards the fancy car gleaming in the sunlight, while Helen approached her youngest son. Taking him by the hand, she quickly said in a guilty voice, "I'm sorry, Tony. I didn't know that Howard would decide this. You know I couldn't have changed anything. You know how stubborn your father was." The young man hugged his mother and replied quietly, "It's okay, Mum. Everything will be fine. It's not about the money. I'll figure it out somehow. Just take care of yourself, and I'll definitely call you. Go, or Vincent will get upset." Helen went to the car, and Tony remained standing on the porch of the notary's office, resentful towards his father, Vincent, and the world as a whole. He couldn't understand why his father had such a negative attitude towards him from childhood until the last day of his life, which he clearly didn't deserve. Two brothers, growing up in the same family, and now one got everything, while the other was left with a dilapidated house in the middle of nowhere. Tony didn't even doubt that this was how his father's inheritance looked like. After all, Howard brought this stable by chance, and he only went there for the first couple of years after the purchase. At that time, his father was obsessed with horses, and each time he came back from there, he boasted about buying another thoroughbred horse. But it didn't last long. Business took over, it started to flourish, and then his health deteriorated in addition. Tony couldn't even remember the last time his father had visited his stable, and now he was forced by his father's will to gather his things that could fit in one travel bag, leave his home, and go to the address specified in the will. After buying a bus ticket, Tony sat in the back seat and sank into his unhappy thoughts. 3 hours later, the driver turned around, said they had arrived and dropped him off on the main street of the village. Looking around, Tony immediately realised that his hope of finding a job here had instantly disappeared. The whole village consisted of that single central street. There were no more than 20, at most 25 houses, and they didn't look alike. Some were freshly painted, with well-maintained vegetable gardens, while others were grey and shabby, as if they had endured a difficult life. Tony adjusted his bag on his shoulder and went to find his own house. At the very outskirts, a little away from the street, he saw something that resembled a house. He realised it was his property only because of the nearby stable with its overgrown fence. There wasn't even a gate in front of the house itself. It was lying on the grass. The plot was so overgrown with weeds that Tony had to clear a path, as if cutting through a thicket to reach the porch. At that moment, he remembered his father's words, which he had said as soon as he finished school. "Well, now roll up your sleeves," his father had said, with some incomprehensible threat. "Go work as a loader or a stable boy, shoveling manure. That's the kind of life you're meant for. You can't rely on me or your mother. I've achieved everything on my own, and you, if you can, you'll have to fend for yourself." Now Tony stood in front of the stable house and realised that his father's words had been prophetic. Sighing sadly, the young man sat down on the broken porch step and found himself afraid and unwilling to go inside. The fear wasn't directed at anyone or anything in particular. Tony simply couldn't imagine what awaited him inside that hut, with the door hanging on one hinge, a broken window and a torn piece of roof. Hoping to postpone the meeting with the unknown, Tony set off to inspect the stable, leaving his bag on the porch. As he approached the corner of the grey structure, he heard a horse's neighing coming from inside. At first he thought he was imagining things, but when he opened the heavy gate, he was greeted by the handsome black horse. The horse was standing in one of the paddocks, which was the only one in perfect order. Just as Tony pondered about it, he heard a hoarse cough behind him. He turned around and saw a limping man making his way towards him. "Good day," the man said in a gruff voice. "What brings you here? Can I be of any assistance?" Tony explained who he was, briefly sharing the story of his father's death and the inheritance of the stables. "Oh, I see," the man croaked. He suggested they continue their conversation outside and pointed to a log by the gate. As they sat down, Frank, as the limping man introduced himself, lighted up a cigarette and spoke. "Your father, when he bought this farm, visited for a while and bought some expensive horses. They were magnificent. You couldn't take your eyes off them. He hired workers to take care of the animals. That's when I got a job here, cleaning up manure and carrying water. Then your father stopped visiting his stable, probably when he fell ill. Instead, his assistant showed up, fired all the workers at once, and sold the horses. I remember thinking, why would your father sell everything if he loved horses so much? But that's how it turned out." Frank sighed as his cigarette burned out, then nodded towards the horse in the stall and continued. "This one couldn't be sold right away, so he was left here. He's a young horse, but like me, he has a limp on one hoof. I felt sorry for the poor fellow and took care of him. You know, if you like, you can ask the blacksmith to take a look at him, maybe change the horseshoe, and the horse will improve. I don't know much about these things, but it seems to me that the horse is special, a thoroughbred, so to speak, "Your father didn't just buy any horse." Tony sighed and promised to take care of the horse, not wanting to offend Frank. In reality, the horse was the least of his concerns. He didn't know how he would survive. He had no money, no job, and the house had been ransacked and left in ruins. He had nowhere to return to, as his brother had made it clear at the notary's office that everyone should live in his inherited house. Therefore, Tony couldn't go back to his parents' house. There was only one way out. He had to find a way to survive in this wilderness. After chatting a little more with Frank, he bid him farewell and headed towards the house. He needed to settle in before dark. However, as Tony stepped over the threshold of his future home, he was taken aback. Once again, he was astounded by how cruelly his father had treated him. It could hardly be called a dwelling. The small room, which had likely been a kitchen, had a broken window and was littered with cigarette butts and empty bottles. The only furniture that remained intact was a sturdy cupboard, while a table and a couple of stools were scattered around as if there had been a fight. The second room in the house seemed to have been occupied by mice for a long time. The old cushions and blankets were in terrible condition due to their nibbling. At that moment, Tony was grateful that the bed was made of metal. Otherwise, the audacious rodents would have destroyed even the bed. There were two other things that brought him some relief: a whole window in the room and an old chest in the corner. Surprisingly, neither the mice nor the previous occupants had managed to reach it. The chest contained a couple of usable bedsheets, although they were not new. There were men's and women's shirts, trousers. Everything was washed, but there was a faint smell of mustiness or age. For the rest of the day he rolled up his sleeves and removed all the junk from the house, piling it in the farthest corner of the yard, with hopes of burning it all some day. Then he went to the stable, where he found a decent bucket. After fetching water from the well in the yard, Tony carefully washed the room where the bed stood. He decided to start there, as it was the only place he could spend the night without worrying about raindrops falling through the broken window. Exhausted, the young man fell asleep that evening on the bare net of the old rusty bed, completely unaware of the challenges that awaited him. He woke up the next morning to the rumbling of his empty stomach. If there had been anyone else in the house, they would have heard the loud growls from outside. It was then that Tony remembered he had eaten his last meal at the bus station before coming here. He had bought a bottle of lemonade and a couple of pies with some sweet potatoes. He was about to get up when someone knocked on the window. He tried to rise but cried out in pain. He had slept so well during the night that he hadn't even noticed the iron mesh of the bed digging into his skin. Tony stood for a moment trying to ease the pain and massage his skin before approaching the window. He opened the shutters wide and saw a female angel. She was a short girl wearing a colourful sundress that almost reached her heels and a perfectly white headscarf. She smiled shyly and handed him a package. "Hello, I'm Rachel, Frank's neighbour," said the stranger, charmingly smiling. "He told me all about you yesterday, so I thought by the time the market opens at noon, you'll starve to death. I'm going to the farm this way anyway, so I brought some milk and half a loaf of bread." Catching Tony's glance, she lowered her eyes in embarrassment and added sadly, "I'm sorry, I have nothing else to offer. My son and I live alone, so this is what we eat, and I'm excited to share it with you." Tony suddenly disappeared from the window and in a second appeared beside Rachel. Taking the package from the girl's hands, he exclaimed, "Rachel, you saved me from starving to death. I woke up thinking I was dying. I was so hungry." She smiled, and Tony continued, "I thought I'd go to the shop and buy everything, but now I realise that you don't even have one here, and I wouldn't have an energy to get to the market. You saved me, but I can't even thank you enough. I can't even invite you into my house. I'm still afraid to enter it myself, but I promise, as soon as I've put things in order, I'll invite you and your son to have tea." Throughout their conversation, Tony discreetly observed Rachel. Her features seemed familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen her before. Over the next few days, Tony tidied up his new home. Frank managed to find some glass somewhere, and they carefully cut it and installed it in the kitchen window. Talking about the charms of country life, the men quickly whitewashed the walls of the house, while Frank's wife cooked dinner for them. Tony was surprised at himself. He could handle the saw and hammer he had found behind the house with ease, even though he had never even suspected the existence of such tools before. In their family, there had always been hired workers to do such tasks. Now, he himself fixed the table and kitchen chairs, and he even enjoyed it. Rachel visited him once more, waving her hands in surprise, and said, "I thought nothing good would ever come out of this messy house, but it's still possible to live and even thrive here. You have golden hands. The only thing you need to make it cozier is a curtain for the window. I would sew them if I had something to make them from." Tony smiled mysteriously and went into the other room, where there was a chest. A few minutes later, he returned with a colourful sheet. "How about using this?" he offered Rachel. Luckily, the previous owners were stockpiling, and the looters didn't have much use for it. Rachel unfolded the sheet and went to the window to see how it looked. Satisfied, she said, "Why not? We won't tell anyone it used to be bedding. I'll sew them today, and we can hang them up tomorrow." Tony looked at her admirably and once again thought about how much he liked this simple country woman. Perhaps he would even have tried to court her, but Rachel had made it clear from the first day that they could only be friends. Tony had already learned that Rachel was married before, but it had been brief and unsuccessful. When he asked her to tell him about herself, Rachel reluctantly shared her story. "Before the wedding, my husband used to treat me like a princess," she said sadly as they sat on a bench outside the house. "But as soon as we got married, he changed completely. He started hanging out almost every day and chasing after other women. I endured it for a long time, crying and begging him to change, but I couldn't make a difference. Even when I became pregnant, it didn't make him reconsider his life. When my son was just 3 months old, that scoundrel became even more audacious and openly flirted with a village woman named Howard. Then they went with her to the city. Since then, Billy and I have been living alone." When Tony asked her where her son was, Rachel said that Frank's wife was helping him, so when she had to go to work, she looked after the boy. Rachel herself worked as a milkmaid for a local farmer and went to the cowshed every morning at dawn. A few days later, while walking with Billy, she checked on Tony, and he quickly found a common language with the little boy. Tony was grateful to have met Rachel. Communicating with her was effortless. She often gave him gardening advice, explaining how and why to take care of the plants. She also recommended a blacksmith to help with Eclipse, the horse Tony had inherited. The cost to change the horseshoes was significant for Tony's small budget, but nevertheless, he decided to proceed and never regretted his decision. When Frank saw how fast Eclipse was galloping, he exclaimed, "Oh, I've told you, this young spirited horse. I wish I could change my shoes and not limp any more." Tony smiled back. He had liked Frank from the first day. He didn't drink and was skilled at everything. Frank helped him fix the stable fence and taught him how to repair the roof. "Do you know why I'm lame?" Smoking a cigarette, the elderly man asked Tony. "I fell off the roof when I was young. Back then, my army buddy and I were working hard. We built houses, repaired them when needed, made good money, by the way. We were young and foolish. One day, after having a few shots in the autumn cold, we climbed onto the scaffolding. I didn't even realise what went wrong, but I fell in no time. My friend wasn't hurt at all, but the doctors had to pick up pieces of my leg and save it. Since then, I don't drink alcohol, but unfortunately, I can't make my leg healthy again." Tony enjoyed listening to his elderly neighbour. He had a way of telling stories that were captivating. They often sat by the stables in the evening, with Frank puffing on a cigarette, reminiscing about the past. During these months, Tony found himself glad to be in this village. The people here were different from city dwellers, simple, kind, living a quiet and measured life without excesses or fuss. Tony was pleased with the house that he had gradually fixed up. It had become quite comfortable to live in. His resentment towards his brother had gradually faded, and he kept his promise to call his mother from time to time. During their last conversation, Helen expressed concern about Vincent. "Oh, Tony, I'm worried about your brother. He completely abandoned his studies. He doesn't want to work either. He handed over his father's business to his friend and is just living off the interest. He spends his nights drinking and partying with the money. He mentioned you several times. He said you'll starve to death, and that even if you come crawling back on your knees, he won't give you a penny." "Don't worry, Mum," Tony said cheerfully. "I'm not going to crawl, and I'm sure I won't starve to death. Everything is fine with me, even better than I expected at the beginning." At that moment, he wasn't lying. He said how he truly felt. He felt good and at ease. The only thing that saddened him was the lack of job opportunities, but he was almost certain that things would change soon. And change did come soon. That day, despite the early morning, Tony was already on his first crop in the vegetable garden when Rachel rushed into the gate. She was waving a piece of paper and speaking excitedly. "Tony, look what I found! I went to the chief, to our farmer, for his pay, and I saw this leaflet lying there. Read it quickly. It's an opportunity for you and Eclipse." Tony took the leaflet, which had a herd of horses at its centre and an announcement below. It turned out that a horse show was being held in the neighbouring town. The requirements were minimal, but the main prize was substantial. After reading the text, Tony grinned and handed the sheet back to Rachel, saying, "There will probably be thoroughbred horses exhibited there, and our Eclipse is only a thoroughbred, according to Frank's words." Rachel tried to persuade him for a while, but then she waved her hand, placed the leaflet on the porch, and left a bottle of milk on it. Turning around, she disappeared behind the gate, as quickly as she had appeared. Tony returned to his work. However, the thought of the horse show lingered in his mind. The prize money, by village standards, was substantial, and although he didn't believe in success, Tony decided to give it a try. Frank's words about his father only buying purebred horses, which meant that Eclipse could be purebred, stuck with him. In the remaining days before the exhibition, Tony carefully prepared the horse, and Frank gladly assisted him. On the appointed day, they stood in line with the other participants, filled with excitement. The competition was fierce, with each horse being more beautiful than the next. At each stage, they had to showcase the horse's best qualities. Surprisingly, Eclipse won the hearts of almost all the judges. Tony was astonished when his pet horse was declared the winner. Right after the award ceremony, an older man with grey hair approached Tony and gently stroked the smooth mane of Eclipse. He said thoughtfully, "He's so beautiful. You know, this breed is very rare, and only a few have been brought to our country from abroad. Such a horse is valuable, believe me. Would you consider selling him? I would pay a good price." When the man named the amount he was willing to pay for Eclipse, Tony realised that his father hadn't totally deprived him of inheritance as he had thought. The horse had already brought in and could still bring in a lot of money. As Tony pondered the events that had unfolded, the man continued to stroke Eclipse. Finally, the young man responded firmly, "No, I won't sell the horse. He was inherited by me, and he is like a memory of my father." In his mind, Tony was already envisaging taking Eclipse to future tournaments. After all, having won such a prize once, why not try his luck again? The man had even imagined how he would use the money he had won to create his own small farm and live comfortably like others. However, his thoughts were interrupted by the same gentleman. "You know, I knew your father very well. My name is Mr. Sheldon. We started our business together when we were young, and we were friends. We had been friends since our student days. We studied together. Those were good times. We shared all our joys and sorrows. It was surprisingly easy for both of us. Many people even envied us, but then years later, our paths diverged and we lost touch, the stranger said, his voice filled with sadness as he seemed to reminisce about the past. At that moment, Tony found himself torn between wanting to hear about his father's past and not wanting to dwell on it. He was about to bid farewell when the stranger spoke again. You know, I recently read in the newspaper about your father's death and your family. Something puzzled me. Although I hadn't spoken to Howard in many years, I know for a fact that he didn't have 2 sons, but a daughter and a son. He was overjoyed when his daughter was born first. He said she would be his little princess. And when his son was born a couple of years later, Howard was ecstatic. We were still good friends then. Our children were born around the same time. Howard's daughter was born in early April, and my eldest was born a month later, in May. We used to joke, when they grow up, we'll merge our businesses by getting them married. But I don't have a sister, Tony interrupted. I only have Vincent, my brother. It's true he was born in the same year when you say your daughter was born. Mr. Sheldon looked at Tony intently and continued thoughtfully. You know, young man, those were troubled times. There were problems in business, among other things. Howard and his family disappeared from the city. No one really knew what happened. Suddenly, your family vanished for a couple of years and then reappeared. But instead of a daughter, Howard had an older son. People gossiped, but eventually they moved on with their own lives, dealing with their own problems as best they could. After a moment of silence, the man turned his attention back to the horse, stroking its beauty. In a half-whisper, he spoke mysteriously to Tony. But what confused me even more than the substitution of a daughter for a son was your father's attitude towards horses. You know, it intrigued me. From a young age, Howard adored horses and treated them like deities. He carefully selected each of his prized horses, knowing their pedigrees and providing them with ideal living conditions. When he returned, many of our mutual acquaintances noticed how much he had changed. At first I didn't believe it, but when I saw the condition of his stables, I was shocked that your father had allowed them to fall into such disrepair. Tony listened intently, trying to make sense of it all. It was unfathomable to him how his father had allowed the stable to ruin. Moreover, the revelation that his older sister, who should have existed according to the stranger, had vanished, raised questions about his family's past. The conversation with his father's friend at the exhibition left Tony's mind in turmoil. However, upon returning to the village, he became engrossed in new concerns, and the investigation into the mystery of his family would have to be postponed for another time. With the winnings he received thanks to Eclipse, Tony, with the help of Frank, his wife and Rachel, set up a small farm. Though modest in scale, it provided him with enough to live comfortably. Rachel left her job with the farmer to join Tony, and while he tried to court her again, they realized that their relationship could only be one of friendship. But he was happy, and such a relationship was somehow easy for him with Rachel. Nearly a year had passed since Tony moved to the village, and he couldn't imagine how he had ever lived in the bustling, noisy and wicked city. However, one day he received an unexpected call from his older brother. From the first moments of their conversation, Tony sensed that Vincent still harboured hatred for him, and seemed to call solely to mock him. "Well, little brother, aren't you starving yet?" Vincent asked, and then, noticing the farm behind Tony through the video call, he continued in astonishment. "Have you been hired as a cattle farmer? Yeah, where else could someone like you find work?" When Tony informed Vincent that it was his own farm and stable, Vincent fell silent, abruptly cutting off his prepared speech. It was clear that his anger overflowed. Things had not turned out as he had hoped. Not only had Tony not starved to death, but he had also become a businessman, albeit in the village and without million-dollar profits. Clearly, this fact pained the older brother so much that he decided to visit that very day, supposedly to check on him. Throughout this time, Tony couldn't shake the thought that he had an older sister somewhere. But then, who was Vincent to him? Tony concluded that his brother's arrival came at the right moment, as it presented an opportunity to collect material for a DNA test. He carefully took a cigarette butt left by Vincent in the ashtray, as well as the glass from which he had been drinking. Tony even managed to collect a few hairs from the headrest of the driver's seat while his brother inspected his possessions. Immediately after Vincent's departure, Tony went to the city and submitted all the necessary materials for the kinship test. He anxiously awaited the results, as it was a time filled with both excitement and agony. Tony had no idea what the test would reveal, but he was certain that there was some mystery involved. The DNA results indicated that Tony and Vincent were complete strangers to each other, having no trace of a familial relationship. Upon receiving the result, Tony sat down on a bench in the square in front of the clinic, staring at the document, unsure of what to do next. It was obvious that there was some well-thought-out machination, but it would be impossible to solve it on his own. After sitting for some time, Tony placed the result sheet into his inner pocket and headed to the nearest police station. There, the investigator listened attentively and suggested filing a detailed statement. At that moment, Tony had little faith that anyone would take up his case. He believed it would likely be shelved and eventually forgotten. To his surprise, just a few days later, he was summoned to the police station. In the investigator's office, Vincent was sitting anxiously, appearing much less confident than before. He seemed frightened and suddenly began whispering rapidly, as if afraid of not being able to relay everything in time. "Tony, what nonsense are they talking about? This man interrogated me for half an hour, asking if I knew any missing businessmen who were supposedly your parents. He claims that you're not my brother at all. It's ridiculous. We've always been together. He's questioning our mother right now." At that moment, Tony didn't believe Vincent, even though his brother's appearance clearly indicated that he was in shock upon hearing the news. Helen spent several hours with the detective Shields. Tony grew concerned for her, as her health had noticeably declined after their father's death. When she emerged from the investigator's office into the corridor, it was alarming to see her. She looked as if she had aged another 10 years, with a stooped back, red eyes from crying, and a dull gaze. Ignoring her sons, the woman slowly staggered out, and the investigator invited Tony into the office. "My name is Detective Paul Shields. What a job you've given us," began the policeman, motioning for us to sit down. "You have no idea what happened. It turns out that your so-called parents are not your natural parents. This family worked for your real parents as servants, and these monsters have been planning their crime for a long time, jealous of your parents' wealth." The investigator took out his tape recorder and said, "Here, you can hear the whole thing for yourself. Your so-called mother, afraid of ending her life behind bars, confessed everything." The investigator went to sort out some folders in a cupboard against the wall, and Tony listened, not believing what was happening. "My husband and I were thinking at the time," said a familiar female voice from the dictaphone. "Why do they get everything and we get nothing? So my Howard set it up. He was clever. When the owners went somewhere, they sometimes asked Howard to drive them. This time, he had to drive them again. At breakfast, he gave me some powder and told me to put it in the tea of both the owners. and after they left, to be ready in a couple of hours. He came back nervous, twitchy. He asked me to get all the kids in the car quickly. There were only 3 of them in the house, their daughter and son and our son, Vincent. Without asking unnecessary questions, I did everything as ordered, and in a few hours we were far from the city where we lived. There, in a small hotel, Howard told me that there are no more our owners, and now we'll be instead of them. But of course, it still required great effort. Appearance and age, we were something like him, but the beauticians and plastic surgeons did some other things. The recording stopped halfway through, and in the ensuing silence, the investigator's voice came from behind him. "Oh, damn, it's run out of power. She has been talking about their crime for so long. Sir, let me recharge it. Why don't I pour you some tea? You need time to adjust to this terrible truth." Handing Tony a cut glass, he said, "You sit closer and listen to it, plugged into the socket." Then Detective Shields continued to go through the documents in the cupboard, and Tony began to listen further. "Howard thought everything out in advance," the false mother continued, "and managed to take a lot of the money from the former owners. We rented a big house, hundreds of kilometres from the town where we lived. Howard said we should wait some time. Then we found a village orphanage somewhere along the road where we were travelling. My husband said we couldn't get rid of both at once. It would be suspicious, and so they might ask. He made up a story that we were on a trip and our daughter died suddenly, so we adopted a boy to ease my maternal grief. When we returned some time later, we had no difficulty in communicating with acquaintances, for we had been there for many years and knew well the habits and tastes of our hosts. Howard quickly entered the role and easily got into the image of the host. And we would have lived like that if you didn't dig." The voice in the dictaphone sighed and fell silent. Detective Shields went to the table and pressed the off button. Touching Tony's shoulder, he said, "Hang in there. I understand it's hard to find out that the people you thought were your parents are not parents, but murderers. But the main thing is that you found out that you have a sister. I think we'll try to find her." Tony, who had been in a sort of stupor all this time, seemed to come to his senses, and raising his eyes to Detective Shields, he pleaded, "Please, help me find her. After all, she is the only person in the whole world who is really dear to me." He would have started the search himself, but he didn't know where to start, so he decided to wait, leaving it entirely to the police. Every day his thoughts returned to what he had heard in the investigator's office. A little over a fortnight had passed. During that time he didn't see his brother or his so-called mother again. One morning, while he and Frank were cleaning the stable, Detective Shields appeared on the doorstep. "Hello, everyone," he began in a cheerful voice and continued, "I have good news for you. Tony, why don't you make me some tea? I'll tell you everything I've learned about your sister." Tony's pitchfork nearly fell out of his hand. He was afraid to hear that his sister, as well as his parents, were gone. However, looking at the cheerful policeman, he calmed down. It was clear that he had come with good news. Setting down his instrument, he invited the guest into the house. It turned out that Tony's sister had been adopted by a childless couple many years ago after being placed in an orphanage. To avoid unnecessary gossip, the family had moved to the countryside and lived just 2 villages away from where Tony now resided. Excitedly, Tony asked, "Please, tell me, is she alive? Does she still live there? I'll go there right away." But the policeman just laughed, placed his hand on Tony's shoulder and sat him down. "Calm down," he continued jokingly. "There's no need to go anywhere. Your sister is alive. Unfortunately, her parents are no longer alive, so she has moved. But you won't believe where." Tony looked at him questioningly, and the policeman, as if testing his patience, revealed information gradually. At that moment, The kitchen door swung open, and Rachel appeared on the threshold, radiating happiness. "Well, I'd like you to meet her," said Detective Shields. "She is your very real sister." Rachel smiled, and Tony felt like he was in a dream. Everything that was happening seemed unreal, but kind and happy. Now it became clear to him why Rachel's face seemed so familiar. That day, the three of them sat in the kitchen for a long time, discussing everything they had learned. As they were about to leave, Detective Shields offered to give Rachel a ride home. They said goodbye to Tony, and Tony could hardly sleep that night. There had been so much information lately that his head was about to burst. The most important thing was that now he had his own sister and a wonderful nephew. From that day on, Tony noticed that Paul began to visit their village frequently. That day, after work, they were going to have dinner at Tony's house. They often gather there now. When Paul appeared on the doorstep with a huge bouquet of flowers, he nervously addressed Tony. "Here's the thing. I have fallen in love and want to marry Rachel. Rachel has already given her consent." Tony put on a serious expression and then, barely restraining a smile, said, "Of course I don't mind, but according to tradition, the eldest members of the family have to arrange their private lives first." Saying this, he approached the woman standing at the stove, embraced her, and whispered quietly, "You agree to be my wife, don't you?" Tony had been in love with Danielle, a veterinarian who had come to examine Eclipse for 3 months already. He took great care of his horse, considering it a talisman of happiness. He had also met Danielle thanks to Eclipse. During all this time, Tony had been planning to propose to Danielle, but couldn't muster the courage. Now he thought it was the perfect moment. That evening, the small house felt especially warm in the cosy kitchen, and a month later they had a lively village wedding. After the wedding, everyone decided to stay and live in the village. Tony received the inheritance that had been misappropriated by Vincent and his mother, but instead of returning to the city, he sold everything and expanded his farm, giving half of it to his sister. He learned from Paul that his unmarried mother had moved in with Vincent, who, left without money, had been living on odd jobs and drinking. However, Tony was not interested in this at all. He became the happiest man, loving his sister, adoring his wife, and eagerly preparing to become a father. And for all of this, he was grateful to Eclipse. Eric enjoyed taking trips out of town throughout the year, but especially during the summer. He cherished the silence, fresh air, and minimal traffic. After dropping off a client in a rural village, he would drive back along the empty road and relish in the perfect day with sunny and warm weather despite the early hours. Eric turned on some soft music, opened the window and greedily breathed in the fresh air. At that moment, he couldn't help but think if it weren't for work, he would stay and wander through the forest, enjoying the serene silence. However, it was Saturday, and there was a lot of impatient clients in the city, so he needed to return as soon as possible. Mr. Park, Eric's boss, had already called him a few times, demanding that he return immediately. Being a retired officer, Mr. Park was used to expecting unconditional obedience, often not realizing the impossibility of his demands. On this particular day, when Eric received the order, he tried to explain that it would take about 40 minutes for a one-way trip, making it impossible to return within an hour. However, the boss continued insisting on being back in the city within an hour. During the trip, Mr. Park was contacting Eric every 10 minutes, demanding updates on his whereabouts and how much time he needed to reach the city. It seemed like he believed that the constant pressure would somehow speed up the process. Although the job had its merits, a good and timely salary, Eric sometimes contemplated quitting because of his boss. However, since he wasn't accustomed to constantly changing jobs, he decided to tolerate it for as long as he could. Suddenly, Eric felt that the car began to drive strangely. "Damn, how unlucky I am," Eric exclaimed out loud, realizing that he had a flat tire. He stopped the car, got out, and walked around to find that the front right tire was damaged. "Well, now Mr. Park will definitely be furious with me," Eric thought aloud as he went to the trunk. As he was about to retrieve the spare tire, he heard a child's voice from somewhere behind him. "Sir, don't worry. Everything will be fine with you. I can feel it." Turning around, Eric noticed a girl, about 5 years old, looking at him with black eyes and a friendly smile. "Where did you come from? All alone out here in the forest? Are you lost or something?" Eric asked in surprise. The little girl immediately started babbling. "No, I'm going to the pharmacy in town. My grandmother Sarah asked me to get some drops. She said her heart was racing and her blood pressure was so high, so I came to the bus stop, but it still hadn't arrived." Eric quickly realized from the girl's clothing that she appeared to be from a poor family. Her colourful dress was too big, and her knitted jacket was covered in lint balls and had lost its original colour and shape from frequent washing. "How could they let you go alone?" Eric asked, surprised. The little girl, seemingly delighted to have someone to talk to, responded emotionally. "There's no one else to go but me. Grandma is old and sick. She doesn't leave the house. And by the way, I'm a big girl and I am used to going to town on my own. Sometimes I even recite poems to people on the bus. I also sing songs and people clap and give me money. Although when my grandmother Sarah found out about my performances on the bus, she started taking the money away." Saying this, the girl turned slightly sad, but then with a mischievous squint in her eyes, she added quietly, "But I secretly bought a chocolate bar with the money a couple of times and ate it while waiting for the bus back home. And I told Sarah that nobody gave me any money. Elderly people shouldn't have sweets anyway." Eric's heart ached with sympathy for the little skinny talker. It was evident that she had no one except her sick grandmother, but she was remarkably independent for her age and accustomed to taking care of herself. The little girl interrupted his thoughts with a question. "And when you've finished fixing the tire, please give me a ride into town. I have some money saved up. My name is Hope, by the way." She rummaged through the folds of her dress, found a pocket, and proudly pulled out a crumpled bill after a couple of minutes. Eric, seeing the $1 note, smiled and gently pushed her hand away, saying, "Keep it hidden. You'll still need it. I'll change the tire, take you to the pharmacy and then bring you back to the village. You can wait in the car. I'll be quick." Eric knew that his boss wouldn't approve of this, but right now the little girl was more important to him. The man made up his mind to help her no matter what. After replacing the tire, he got back into the car and immediately noticed Hope staring at a brightly coloured pack of cookies on the seat next to her. "Are you hungry? You can have a cookie, and there's still water," the man offered, extending her a bottle. Hope happily accepted the offer, quickly opened the packet, and started eating cookies with pleasure. Noticing Eric watching her, she apologized. "I didn't have an opportunity to eat this morning, even though I cooked potatoes last night." Eric turned away to avoid embarrassing her and started the car. He decided that he would feed the poor girl in the city and buy her some food. The radio constantly emitted the boss's stern voice, demanding to be contacted, but Eric knew that even if he tried to explain, he wouldn't understand. So he minimized the volume and decided he would call back once he had safely returned the girl home. At that moment, Hope looked at him fearfully and asked softly, "Will you get in trouble because of me? Maybe you shouldn't have helped me. Your boss is yelling." Eric smiled and tried to reassure her. "Don't worry about it. I had to help you. We can't leave your sick grandmother without medicine. Let the boss yell. It's his job." He winked at his little companion, and she, feeling reassured, resumed looking at the houses and trees. Upon entering the city, Eric stopped the car near the pharmacy and offered to accompany Hope, but she insisted, with the seriousness of an adult. "No need. I can handle it on my own. Sarah had written everything on a piece of paper. I'll just give it to the lady at the window. give her the money, and then get the medicine. Why do you treat me like a little girl? You should focus on calming down your boss and talking to him. Eric almost laughed. It was amusing to hear her speak so maturely about the situation. However, he decided to stay in the car. Hope indeed returned from the pharmacy quickly, carrying a small bag. "See? You wanted to come with me, but I came back fast, didn't I?" she asked. Eric countered by suggesting, "You know what? I'm actually hungry. It's lunchtime and I see a cafe across the street. Shall we go eat there and then continue our journey back?" Hope tried to resist, saying that the cookies she had eaten would be enough for a long time, but Eric insisted, and they went to the cafe on the first floor of a residential building. Realizing that the girl wouldn't understand the menu, he decided to order according to his own taste. While they were waiting for their order, Hope looked around the interior with interest. Then she leaned closer and whispered, "I've never been in such a beautiful place. The pictures on the walls are so nice. You know, my best dream is learning to draw, and there are so many vases. And why are there so many bottles on the high table over there?" She nodded her head towards the bar. Eric answered her in the same hushed tone. "That's because men and women come to celebrate something here, and they get these drinks poured for them, and then they have fun." The girl looked at them, then at the bottles, and then back at Eric again. She asked, a little louder this time, "Can't they be funny by themselves? Do they have to have a bottle?" Before Eric could answer, a young waitress approached and placed plates of soup, a tray of bread, and utensils in front of them. Wishing them a pleasant meal, the waiter left, and Hope turned in her chair to watch her leave with an admiring look. Then she turned back to Eric and whispered again, "And even the waitress here is beautiful too. Have you seen her watch and ring?" Eric couldn't help but smile and replied quietly, "When did you have time to notice everything? Well, let's eat. I hope the food here is as good as the place itself." He ordered chicken soup with homemade noodles, and the girl ate every last drop. When the second course arrived, consisting of mashed potatoes and a baked chicken leg, the little girl timidly asked, "Is this all for me as well?" "Of course it's for you. Who else would it be for? I, as you can see, have my own portion," Eric replied. Seeing that Hope seemed somehow confused, he added, "Is something wrong? Did you not like it?" Hope quickly began to justify herself, saying, "No, on the contrary, everything is so delicious. I'm afraid I'll burst. I'm just a little girl, I can't eat too much, or I'll become fat and ugly. That's what my grandmother Sarah always says whenever I sit down to eat." Eric was already indignant in his heart. What kind of grandmother sends a small child to the city alone, takes away hard-earned money, and limits her food? Despite claiming to be full, the girl eagerly ate the chicken leg, nibbling it to the last piece of meat, but politely declined the mashed potatoes. When asked if she wanted another piece of cake or ice cream, she quietly said, "I'm sorry, but I'm sure I'll burst if I eat anything else. Thank you so much. I've never had anything so delicious. Sarah says there's no money for chicken, so she buys bones from the chicken store. The soup made from them is not so tasty, and there's no meat in it at all." Listening to the little girl, Eric marvelled at how mature and sensible she was, and how she viewed everything with understanding, from her grandmother to the world around her. After leaving the cafe, they went into the supermarket nearby. Eric stopped the girl at the entrance, squatted down to her level, and looking into her eyes, he said, "Hope, let's make a deal. You can take any products in the store, anything you need or want to eat. Imagine I'm a magician, and whatever you choose will be yours." The little girl's reaction was unexpected. Instead of the joy Eric had anticipated, tears welled up in Hope's eyes. In a trembling voice, she asked, "Can I really take anything I want?" "Of course, anything you want," Eric replied, taking her hand. But Hope, seemingly unable to believe what was happening, asked again, "For example, porridge and chicken for Sarah?" Eric nodded and said, "Hope, let's start shopping and decide what we'd like to buy." Surprisingly, she boldly took his hand, and together they entered the shopping hall. At first, she looked confused, by the brightly coloured packages, but then she carefully examined everything. Eric decided to help her and started guiding her to different sections, explaining what each item was. They decided that Hope needed a few chicken carcasses, milk, 5 different yogurts, 2 large packets of sausages, and some cereal and pasta. Just before reaching the checkout, she suddenly remembered something and apologised, saying, "Can I get 1 mackerel for Grandma? She loves mackerel, but they rarely have it at our village store." Eric was once again surprised at how much Hope cared for her grandmother, despite the apparent lack of concern from the grandmother's side. Seeing how the girl wanted to please her, Eric asked her to stay with the overflowing cart while he went back to the fish department to get the mackerel. After paying for the purchases at the cash register and bagging them into 5 bags, Eric carried them to the car. Hope solemnly carried the cake in her hands, covered in chocolate, with a few cherries on top. She was glowing with happiness. It seemed that at that moment her deepest dream had come true. On the way back to the village, Hope slept soundly in the back seat, while Eric kept thinking about her grandmother. He really wanted to see her and the little girl's living conditions. Eric had never seen any of his neighbours or acquaintances who would send their children of the same age to the store, pharmacy, or anywhere else. As they approached the village that Hope had named, Eric quietly woke her up and asked her where the house was. As Eric had expected, they were greeted by an old 1-story building, weathered by time. The windows hadn't been washed for so long ago that it was a wonder any sunlight came through at all. Eric was shocked that Hope was living in such a neglected house. Hearing the sound of a pulled-up car, an obese woman in a stretched and scruffy robe came out of the house. Just by looking at her swollen face and swollen eyes, Eric understood everything. Instead of the supposed elderly woman, bedridden and waiting for medication, there stood a woman about 50 years old who had been drinking for more than one day. Her first words, spoken to Hope, shocked Eric. "Where were you wandering, you little brat? Were you singing songs on the bus again? I'm dying here and you don't care. Did you make money? Give it to me, or you'll spend it on nonsense." The woman shouted without paying attention to the presence of a stranger. Hope immediately turned pale, squeezed herself, and stepped behind Eric. He turned around and noticed that the girl had tightly closed her eyes and covered her ears with her hands. It became clear that this was not the first time, and it was likely that the woman not only yelled at her, but could also raise her hand at her. Eric decided to reason with her and said indignantly, "Why are you doing this to the child? And why do you let her go alone? You may be her grandmother, but you have no right to yell at the girl, especially since she didn't do anything wrong." "What?" Sarah shouted, menacingly putting on a belligerent posture with her hands at her sides, and taking a step towards Eric, continuing, "Who are you to teach me? Get out of here. I'll handle this girl myself. If you want to know, I'm not a grandmother at all. She should be grateful I didn't throw her out like a kitten. Her mother asked me to look after her for a couple of months and gave me some money. But the money ran out and her mum disappeared. Instead of a couple of months, she's been hanging around my neck for almost a year." Eric, who had been holding the shopping bags all this time, put them on the porch and tried to calm the woman down by saying, "Here, I brought groceries. I think you'll need them. Hope even asked for some mackerel, saying that you really like this fish." After a moment of thought, he took out some money out of his pocket and added, "And this is for your care. Maybe you can tell me how you ended up with Hope in the first place." The woman immediately hid the money in her robe pocket and immediately changed her tone. Sitting down on a chair at the porch, she began to tell the whole story. "I had a tenant. Her name was Laura. She came here with this girl in her arms and asked to stay temporarily. Somebody sent her money every month, and she had enough to pay for the room and for food. Then, one day, she said she was going to move to the city. The woman suddenly turned around and shouted at the house door, 'Hope, bring water, my throat is dry.' The little girl immediately ran over with a glass in her hands, and holding it to the woman, asked Eric, "Can I bring all the groceries inside? Otherwise they'll spoil." Eric nodded, once again amazed at how mature Hope was for her age. He offered to help carry the bags into the house, but the woman sharply replied, "Don't go in there, it's messy. Hope can do everything herself. So, about her mum. She asked me to take care of the girl until she settled in the city. She said she would pay me money. I wasn't opposed, especially since it's not a bad addition to my pension. But Laura stopped sending money after 2 months and literally disappeared." Sarah looked at Eric as if seeking understanding. "Tell me, do I need all this trouble? I barely make ends meet for myself. My pension is pennies. And here I have to support this girl." Eric, of course, wanted to be indignant and say that, judging by Hope's appearance, her old clothes probably cost nothing, and that such a little girl probably ate like a sparrow, but he prudently kept silent. Instead, the man pretended to sympathize with the woman, hoping to learn as much as possible about the girl and her mother. He shook his head brokenly and replied, "I understand you very well. It's such a burden. If her own mother doesn't need her, why do you need her? Maybe you have a photo of this good-for-nothing mum. I'm driving all day long. Maybe I'll see her somewhere. I'll call her to conscience." The woman seemed very glad of this suggestion, and with difficulty rising from her chair, stepping heavily with dirty bare feet, she went into the house. She had been gone a long time, and Eric had suddenly decided that she would not return at all. Who knows, he thought, what such a drunkard has in her mind. But then the floorboards creaked, and puffing and pouring sweat, the flushed hostess appeared. It was evident that every step was difficult for her. Sitting down on a chair, she held out a black and white picture, saying, "Here, it was in her things. When she disappeared, I started to pack all her stuff into bags, so that it wouldn't be lying around the house. The picture fell out of the book." Eric looked at the picture and his heart raced. Painfully familiar and very favourite eyes looked at him. He immediately remembered how he had once been in love with this girl, and the feelings were mutual. Having got acquainted by chance at one student party, they literally couldn't live without each other, and were even going to get married. Eric then rented a small apartment and persuaded Laura to move in with him. He decided to save up a little money and then plan a wedding. There was no one to help them in this case. He himself was an orphan. His parents died in a car accident. So they lived in love and harmony for a little over a year, and then suddenly they had a huge fight. After a while, Eric couldn't even remember how it all started. But only after this quarrel, Laura said that she couldn't live with a man who didn't understand her, and left their apartment, slamming the door. Eric tried to stop her then. He tried to reconcile, but she was adamant. Not understanding what he was guilty of, he nevertheless met her every evening after work and asked for forgiveness. But Laura did not even try to listen to him. And then one day she disappeared. She was not at work. At the door of the new apartment where Laura lived, he called several days in a row, but the answer was silence. Then a neighbour, taking pity on him, said that she had packed her things and moved to another city. No one could tell Eric exactly where Laura had moved to. And now he found out that his beloved had given birth to Hope, and his heart pounded even harder. He thought that Hope could very well be his daughter. Therefore, he couldn't leave her with that terrible woman in such a miserable place. He decided to take her with him. "You know what? How about I take Hope with me?" He started the conversation. "I'll buy her some clothes, get her ready for school." For some reason, Eric thought that Sarah would be happy, but it was not so. She suddenly shrieked indignantly. "What do you mean, you'll take her? I'm not giving her away for nothing. I put so much money and effort into her. Her mother will come, and I'll demand money for all the time I've been feeding her girl." Eric was amazed at how greedy that woman was. Even in this situation, her intoxicated brain was not thinking about the fact that the girl would be taken away by a stranger, but how to benefit from this situation. Realizing what she was getting at, Eric took out his wallet, counted out some large bills, and handed them to the woman. Sarah's eyes sparkled, and she wanted to snatch the money, but Eric deftly yanked his hand away. Seeing the surprised look in the swollen eyes, he said in a formidable voice, "I will give you this money if you give me hope for good. I will take her away and we will disappear from your life, and you, in turn, will not remember about it." The woman nodded her head again, like a Chinese dummy, as if afraid that Eric would put the money back in his purse, and quickly rambled, of course, yes, take her away. I'll be only too glad. And I swear never to remember. Yes, you can even adopt, and if you like, take custody. I don't know what they do in cases like this. Why should I remember her? I'll be relieved to be rid of this burden." After overhearing all this conversation, Hope was already standing on the porch with a bag a minute later. "What do you have there?" Eric asked, pointing to the load. The little girl, embarrassed and looking down, timidly replied, "I'm going to live with you now, so these are my things." Eric gently stroked her head and smiled, saying, "I don't think there's anything valuable in there. Let's leave these rags here and buy you all new things." She looked at him incredulously, then at the bag, but still placed it on the floor. On the way back to the city, Eric thanked God for the opportunity to meet Hope. He had always dreamed of having a daughter or son, but his fiancée Lisa always threw a tantrum about it. She didn't want to give birth herself, citing health difficulties. When Eric suggested adopting a baby, she initially agreed, but then categorically refused at the last moment. She always said that she wanted to live for herself and that she didn't want to be tied down with children. Eric found it difficult to hear this because he had always wanted a large family with many children, but it seemed that Lisa didn't share his plans. However, now that he had met Hope and learned that she was the daughter of his former lover, and possibly his own daughter, everything was decided. It didn't matter how Lisa would react to the girl's arrival, but Hope would not go back to that cruel woman. Upon entering the city, Eric decided to stop by the office first and try to explain everything to his boss. He had minimal hope of being understood. When he saw his boss's anger, distorted face from the doorway, he realized that any chance of understanding had vanished before it even appeared. For about 10 minutes, the boss yelled at Eric, calling him irresponsible, insolent, and lazy for not wanting to work. When Eric tried to explain about the flat tire and the girl he had picked up, Mr. Park banged his fist on the table and shouted, "Stop telling me your fairy tales. If transporting beggars and homeless people is preferable for you than working on me, then go ahead. This is not appropriate for my taxi company. Get out, and I never want to see you again." Eric was actually a little glad in his heart because he had wanted to leave that tyrant for a long time. Leaving the office, Eric realized that the turmoil of the day was not over yet. He still had to sort things out with his bride, Lisa, but regardless of the outcome of their conversation, Eric was going to formalize his guardianship of Hope as soon as possible. Before going home, he decided to change the girl's clothes. Calculating the remaining amount of his paycheck, he breathed a sigh of relief. There was enough money for a couple of outfits for Hope and their immediate needs. He hoped to find a new job quickly. Hope, waiting for him in the car and seeing how lost in thought he was when he returned, spoke up as if she understood everything, saying, "Don't worry, everything will be fine for you. I can feel it." Strange as it may seem, Eric did feel some relief at that moment. He turned to her, smiled and said, "Well, if you feel that way, then I believe you. Now let's go buy you some new outfits. I don't have a lot of money, but we can definitely afford a couple of dresses and some nice shoes." Looking at him gratefully, Hope said in a trembling voice, "Thank you for taking me away from Sarah. Don't worry, I know how to do everything. I can clean the floors, peel potatoes, and cook porridge." Eric almost cried hearing this. He reached out to stroke the little girl's messy hair, saying, I'll take care of you myself. Your job is to be a child and go to school. That will be your focus for the next few years. Everything else will work out." They spent almost an hour in the children's store. Hope enthusiastically tried on outfit after outfit, dancing and spinning in each dress. Finally, they chose a couple of them, and also a beautiful lacquered shoe, pants and a few sweaters, a windbreaker and bunny pajamas that Hope didn't want to let go of. Before leaving the store, Hope suddenly stopped Eric, took his hand, and with a pleading voice asked, "Can I put on one of the dresses right now and ride in it?" Eric smiled and replied, "Let's first go home. I'll remind you to take a bath, and then you can try on and wear everything at once." Hope nodded in understanding and replied seriously, "I can't put it on all at once, it won't fit." She looked at Eric and suddenly burst into laughter, imagining how it would look. The man couldn't help but laugh along with her. They arrived at the house in a wonderful mood, which was quickly spoiled by Lisa as soon as they entered the apartment. Eric introduced Hope to her, but Lisa stood across the corridor, propped her arms on her sides, and indignantly said, "Are you crazy? You've brought a dirty ragamuffin home. Don't tell me you're adopting her." In a tone that brooked no objections, Eric sternly replied, "Don't you dare insult the child. I'm tired of indulging your whims and waiting for you to make up your mind. The girl will live here now, and in the next few days I'll start the custody paperwork." At that moment, Eric noticed that Hope stood there, shrinking fearfully, just like she had in the village when Sarah yelled at her. Eric took her hand and whispered softly, "Don't be afraid. I'm with you, and remember, you said everything would be all right." Lisa tried to continue the conversation by screaming, "Fine then, I'm not going to live under the same roof as this lazy little brat. It's either her or me." Eric took the frightened Hope in his arms and, pressing her against him, firmly stated, "I choose the child. The matter is closed. I hope you can pack your things in half an hour." What followed was a real nightmare. Lisa yelled insults at Eric and the girl, gathering her things in a bag. She deliberately smashed all the photos of them together, scattering them around the apartment. Seeing how frightened Hope was, huddled in the corner of the sofa, Eric decided to protect her from this nightmare. He whispered, "Why don't we run away? We could buy some ice cream and eat it in the car until that screamer disappears." The little girl nodded happily, and they immediately left the apartment holding hands. Before leaving, Eric looked into the room where Lisa was still raging and said angrily, "Don't forget, you have half an hour. If you don't, I'll have to help you, and I don't think you'll like it." Not listening to what the scandalized woman shouted after him, he closed the door, and taking Hope by the hand left the apartment. With a light heart, he was ready to start a new life, now with a beautiful child he had long dreamed of. Eric looked at Hope, and they both smiled at each other almost simultaneously, feeling happy as they walked outside hand in hand. It seemed like nothing could ever separate them. After buying ice cream, they decided to sit on a bench in the yard and started talking about all sorts of nonsense. Hope was a very curious and sociable child, and Eric was happy to answer all her questions. After a while, Eric saw Lisa storming out of the entrance in a fury, saying something indignantly to the cab driver. She hastily threw her things into the trunk, got into the car, and disappeared from Eric's life forever. When they returned home, as promised, Eric filled the bathtub with fragrant foam for Hope and went to prepare dinner himself. Despite everything that had happened during the day, he felt light and hopeful. For a whole hour there was singing and splashing water from the bathtub. After preparing mashed potatoes with sausages and placing a fresh tomato on a plate, he called out cheerfully, "Hope, the water must be cold. Come out already." "Please," the girl pleaded, "just 5 more minutes, and I added a little warm water." When Hope finished splashing around in the bathroom, she came out, glowing, and said quietly, "I have never seen so much water. Sarah used to bathe me, but it was in a small tub. I couldn't stay in there for long." Eric smiled and affectionately stroked her wet hair. "You'll see. We'll go to the sea together." That night, Hope fell asleep almost instantly, barely touching the pillow. Eric, however, couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Laura, Hope's mother. He needed to find her. Something must have happened to her, he thought. He knew her too well to believe that she would easily abandon her child. Eric remembered how they used to dream about having many children together. He recalled how Laura used to take care of the neighbours' kids and play with them happily. As morning approached, Eric suddenly remembered an old friend from school. They used to attend soccer games together. Recently they had bumped into each other on the street. Eric learned that Bob had joined the police force after the army and was now married with twin daughters. Thinking that Bob might be able to help him find Laura, Eric called him early in the morning. They agreed to meet for lunch. Eric shared every detail of his first love, their argument and Laura's disappearance. He also gave Bob a photo of Laura and asked him to find out as much as possible. When Bob called and suggested meeting at the same cafe where they had met for the first time, Eric didn't know whether to feel happy or worried. As he walked towards Bob, his heart raced. He feared the worst, that Laura might no longer be alive. "Hi!" Bob greeted Eric, extending his hand. He then shared everything he had learned. Laura had been working as a housekeeper for a wealthy man for a while. "Here's the address. It's in a neighbouring town," Bob said, handing Eric a small piece of paper. "I'm sorry, but that's all I could find out. You should go there yourself and find out. Maybe she still lives there, and everything is fine. I don't have much time, and without a formal complaint, there's not much the police can do." Eric expressed his gratitude to Bob, made arrangements with his neighbour to look after Hope, and headed to the given address. The town was nearby, and within 40 minutes Eric arrived. There stood a 3-story mansion, surrounded by a tall, solid fence. Eric hesitated for a moment, but finally pressed the intercom button. A couple of minutes later he heard a click, indicating that the gate had been opened. The voice that welcomed him through the intercom startled him. "Good afternoon, please come in." At first Eric wondered how the owners of such a grand mansion would allow a stranger to enter so easily, but as he stepped inside he understood. 2 well-built bodyguards in tracksuits stood in front of the entrance, eyeing him intensely. The door to the house opened and a tall grey-haired man appeared on the porch. "Who are you? What can I do for you?" he asked. Eric didn't know where to begin, so he explained that his former fiancée was missing and he was desperately looking for her. At that moment, a short, thin woman of a similar age to the owner approached them. "I apologise for eavesdropping," she said in a soft voice. "We haven't been out much lately, but if you show us a picture of the girl, we might remember if we've seen her." Eric quickly retrieved the photo Sarah had given him from his inside pocket. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed how the guards tensed as he reached into his jacket. They seemed ready to attack him at any moment. When the woman saw the photo card, she gasped. If it hadn't been for her husband supporting her, she would have fallen. Eric helped her sit down on a wicker chair and one of the guards brought medicine and water from the house. As the woman regained her composure, her husband began to speak. "I'm sorry, but we know this young woman, and it's a very painful topic for us. Laura used to work for us as a housekeeper. We had no complaints about her work. She did everything well and quickly. But the problem was different. Our son Stuart fell in love with this simple girl, and there was nothing we could do about it. She felt the same way, and we couldn't stop them. We even laid her off, but it made no difference. They started dating in secret, as our security guard informed us. Then we sent our only son to study abroad, and that's it." At that moment, Eric's heart clenched, and he felt a pang of jealousy stir in his soul. The woman calmed down a bit and spoke in a trembling voice, filled with excitement. "If we could bring our son back now, we wouldn't say a word against their love, but we can't bring anything back. Our boy is dead. We don't know what happened exactly, but his car went off the bridge at high speed a week later when he returned." The woman fell silent, took a sip of water with a trembling hand and continued, "We buried him, but we didn't hear anything more about Laura." The woman sobbed and wiped away the tears running down her cheeks. After saying goodbye, Eric walked out through the gate and stood there confused, not knowing what to do or where to look next. Suddenly he felt an overwhelming desire to see the accident site and its surroundings. When he arrived at the location, he noticed that one side of the bridge was surrounded by farmland. Fields, stretching for many kilometres, were planted with various cereals, while on the other side, just downstream, was a small village. Eric didn't hesitate and he headed there. To his luck, 2 elderly women were sitting on a bench near the third house from the beginning of the village. They were engaged in an emotional conversation, but as soon as Eric's car stopped in front of them, they fell silent. Getting out of the car, he approached them with a smile and said, "Good day, ladies. I'm looking for my friend. She's missing, and her boyfriend died not far from here a few months ago. Maybe you hear or see something that could help me find her?" One of the women looked at Eric curiously, squinted her eyes and asked, "You should go to Caitlin. Her house is the last one on the right side of the road. She sheltered a strange woman, but she hasn't been right in the head. Caitlin found her on the shore, but despite trying everything, she couldn't remember her name or her family." Eric rushed back to the car, shouting with joy, "Thank you, dear ladies." He was certain that the stranger they found on the shore was his Laura. He was relieved that she was alive, and at that moment nothing else mattered. Approaching the house, he immediately recognized her. Laura was sitting at a table under the awning, accompanied by a stern-looking woman. They were cutting apples into a large basin on the table. Greeting them, Eric walked straight to Laura, took her hands in his, and with tears held back whispered, "I'm so happy that you're alive." He gently kissed her hands, but when he looked into her eyes, he saw a bewildered expression. It became clear to him that she didn't recognize him. The woman sitting next to her turned out to be Caitlin, the one who had saved Laura. Watching everything unfold, she asked, "Who are you? I see that you know the poor girl, but she can't remember anything. Her memory is like a blank sheet of paper. Sit down and tell me who you are, where you come from, and what your names are. Maybe it will help jog her memory." Eric started to recount every detail, beginning with the day they first met. However, Laura showed no signs of remembering anything despite his efforts. In a final attempt, Eric decided to bring Laura to his place and introduce her to Hope. Throughout the journey, Laura was sitting in the back seat, frightened and huddled in a corner, gazing at the passing scenery outside the window. When they arrived and opened the door, Hope rushed out into the hallway and stood in the doorway. Within seconds, she ran towards Laura, wrapping her legs around her and bursting into tears. "Mummy, dear, where have you been? I miss you so much. Mummy is back." Laura started to stroke the girl's head, then suddenly kneeled and embraced her daughter, crying. It was clear that she recognized Hope. After calming them both down, Eric prepared dinner for them. During the meal, Laura avoided making eye contact with him, likely feeling guilty. Then she timidly placed her hand on his and quietly apologized, saying, "I'm sorry for everything. Please." This gesture made him realize that Laura's memory had fully returned and that she was ready to talk, but not in front of her daughter. After dinner, Eric stayed behind to clear the table, while Laura put Hope to bed. Eric didn't know what they talked about, but he was happy that they were finally together. Nervously stirring sugar into his tea, Eric sat in the kitchen when Laura emerged from the bedroom. She hesitantly sat down at the opposite end of the table. They sat in silence for a while until Eric spoke up. "You know, I'm so grateful to you for Hope. She's so clever. She sings and recites poems. She missed you so much. Why didn't you tell me when we broke up, so foolishly, that you were pregnant? She's my daughter, isn't she?" Laura suddenly burst into tears. Eric, feeling bewildered, didn't know how to react. He tried to calm her down, saying, "What are you crying about, my love? Everything is wonderful. You're alive, our daughter is a smart girl, and we are all together now. Aren't you happy? It's all in the past. It's all behind us." Laura pushed him away suddenly and whispered, "You don't understand anything. Eric, forgive me, but Hope is not your daughter." Eric felt as if his heart had been struck. He couldn't believe what he was hearing, but Laura couldn't be stopped. She continued speaking. "When we broke up, I couldn't stay in that city anymore and went to earn money. A friend of mine arranged for me to work as a housekeeper for a wealthy family. From the very beginning, their son Stuart started showing interest in me. I wasn't looking for a new relationship after our breakup, but he was persistent. He showered me with his compliments and gifts, and soon we became close. His parents despised me for supposedly leading their son astray. Stuart's father immediately fired me from my job, but that didn't change anything. We continued to see each other. Then his parents paid for his education abroad. It was Stuart's dream, and he couldn't give it up. Hearing about my pregnancy, he said he wasn't ready to tell his parents about the baby yet, but he promised to support us financially and assured me that he would eventually take us to live with him. He went abroad. At first he sent money and everything was fine. Then he suddenly stopped answering my calls and stopped sending money. I was desperate because he said he loved me, and we had a daughter. I took a train to the nearest village and met Sarah there. She was a lonely woman, and I rented a woman at her house because it was cheap. So I lived on benefits and what money I'd managed to put away before. Then I put Hope in daycare and started working in a neighbouring town. I grabbed any job I could. Soon I decided to move back to the city because there were more opportunities there. I asked Sarah to look after Hope for a few months while I found a place to live and a job. One day I bumped into Stuart by chance. I couldn't help but go up to him and tell him what I thought of him. I was shouting, calling him a traitor, and he was shouting at me. That's how we found out that his parents had separated us. It turned out they'd sent him a photo of me in a wedding dress, standing with another man. And it was because of that picture that Stuart cut off all contact with me. Angry and bitter, he ordered me to get in his car, and we drove to his parents' house. But on the way, he lost control and we fell off the bridge into the river. Laura covered her face with her hands, and her shoulders began to shake with sobs. Eric approached and embraced her, saying, "What's done is done. I would like to be Hope's father forever. She and I have found a way to communicate easily. Please, think about my suggestion." Eric took her face in his hands and looked into her eyes. She nodded silently, tears running down her cheeks. At that moment, Eric caught himself thinking that he wanted to cover Hope and Laura from all troubles and misfortunes, never letting them go. Laura, as if sensing this, pressed herself against him. They were sitting embraced like that almost until morning, without saying a word to each other. In the morning, a child's voice brought her back to life. "Mummy, Eric, why are you sitting here? Don't you have a place to sleep? Why are you hugging each other? Are you relatives?" Eric looked pleadingly at Laura, and she, understanding everything without words, took her daughter in her arms and said, "Hope, it's your daddy." The girl began to jump and shout, "Hooray! I now have both Mum and Dad! Super!" She spun around for another 5 minutes and sang some motifs only she knew, very similar to the screams of the Indians. Laura and Eric, watching this performance, laughed and were insanely happy. In the following days, Eric thought about Stuart's parents. Gathering his courage one evening, after Hope had fallen asleep, he took Laura's hand and said, "You know, I think we should show Stuart's parents their granddaughter. You can't imagine how miserable and lonely they are. They even mentioned that they would be ready to give their consent to your relationship with Stuart. It is clear that their hearts need help." Laura didn't say anything, but the next morning she told him, "Eric, you're right. Stuart's parents have the right to know about Hope's existence. Can you take us there? I'm terrified of this meeting." Eric hugged his beloved and quietly whispered in her ear, "Don't be afraid. I will always be there for you. And as our daughter says, everything will be fine." The next weekend they drove to the place where Eric had recently learned about Laura's death. When Hope heard that they were going to meet her real grandparents, she looked slyly at Eric and said, "Let's buy them a cake, like that chocolate one with a cherry." Without waiting for an answer, she immediately continued, "And it's not because I like it, but because you said yourself that people should always visit with a cake." They all laughed at the little girl's ingenuity, but they still took the cake on the trip. As they approached the house, Laura took Eric's hand and quietly said, "I'm scared. I don't know what I'm afraid of, but my chest is trembling." He smiled and calmly answered, "Let me go alone first, prepare them, and then I will come for you." So it was decided. Eric rang the gate, and he was not surprised when it quickly clicked open, inviting him to enter. Without waiting for an invitation, he stepped into the yard. Stuart's father was already on the porch and, smiling, asked, "You, sir, visit us often. What is it this time?" Eric asked to invite his wife, and as soon as she came out, he said, "I have come to introduce you to a person who will remind you of your son and perhaps replace him in your family. Thanks to your information, I found Laura, and I was very hopeful that her daughter would turn out to be my daughter. But alas, she is your son's daughter. And today I brought them here. If you don't want to communicate, just tell me right now, so as not to traumatize the child." He saw the woman's eyes fill with tears, and she took a step toward him and whispered quietly, "Where is she? I want to see her. I beg you, bring her quickly." That evening, there were many words and many tears in the house, and for the first time since Stuart's funeral, there was warmth and light in the house. When parting, Stuart's parents took a promise from Laura and Eric that they would bring Hope to visit them on weekends if possible, and they agreed, of course. A year later, Laura got pregnant, and Eric was glowing with happiness. After all, he would soon have another daughter, and there, he thought, would be several more, for sure. Homeless people had taken up residence in an abandoned warehouse, surrounded by an old fence. They had been living there for a long time, setting up rooms for themselves. Among the residents was Andy, a 29-year-old, who had considered this place home for many years. He shared the modest shelter with 15 other people. Although conflicts arose, the vagrants remained united. There were no alcoholics or worse among them. "Bob's already had a fever for 3 days straight. I'll get some medicine," Andy said firmly. "They won't help us. We're treated worse than dogs," another homeless man said hopelessly. "That's not true. Volunteers are noble people who help us from the heart. Without them, so many of our people would be lost." Andy trusted the volunteers and accepted their help. For many years, the centre had been treating the homeless, providing them with food and shelter, although there weren't many sleeping spots available. Many homeless people did not believe in selfless work and refused to accept help, even in such situations. Andy was more open and sociable. So many people in the city knew him. The volunteers treated him well, and even his close friend was among them. They had met Leela 7 months ago when she worked in the kitchen for the homeless, serving hot lunches on plates. The girl sincerely treated every dirty and bad-smelling person who reached out for food, showing no disgust or aversion. "Your work deserves respect," Andy once remarked when it was his turn to receive a portion of pea soup. "Oh no, I'm not doing anything special," she answered with a shy smile. Leela did not seek praise or admiration. She believed she could help the underprivileged and never missed her shift. Andy's neat appearance surprised her. He never neglected hygiene, regularly showered at the centre, wore clean clothes, and helped his fellow unfortunates. A certain bond quickly grew between the two young people. They communicated easily, often joked and laughed. Leela brought books for Andy and shared her favourite music with him on her player. Sympathy was evident, but neither of them admitted it. Leela's colleagues often noticed her glances at Andy and expressed concern, saying, "Leela, you don't need him. He's not a bad guy, but what future do you have with him? He needs to become a man first, find a stable job, and learn to live in society. What can he offer you?" "I know," Leela sighed, "but that doesn't make it any easier. I'm drawn to him. I can't help it, even though I know it's not a good idea." When Andy arrived at the volunteer centre, he was greeted with pleasure, asked about others, and shared news. "This is an antipyretic. It should help," said the nurse. "It's very effective. What are his other symptoms?" "He's been coughing and has a headache." "You should have come to us sooner. I'll see what medication is left." and he should definitely get medical advice. By the way, a woman asked for you. Go to Paul, he'll provide you more information." Andy was intrigued. Strangers rarely showed interest in him, especially women, and frankly speaking, he had never been pursued by romantic love or had a serious relationship. When he saw this woman for the first time, Andy couldn't believe it. She turned out to be a stunning young woman, around 26 years old, had a stylish short haircut, wearing a t-shirt adorned with rhinestones and leather pants. Large earrings adorned her ears and a small purse hung from her shoulder. As soon as she spotted Andy, she stood up from her seat and waved at him. "Good afternoon. Why do you need me?" asked Andy. "Hello," replied the guest, extending her hand for a shake. "I'm Marilyn. You're probably surprised by my appearance, but don't be afraid. I'm not from any service." "It sounds strange. Why all of a sudden do you need me?" Andy looked at the unfamiliar beauty with disbelief. "The thing is, I started donating to this centre not long ago, so I couldn't help but be interested in its wards, so to speak. First of all, Paul told me about you. You're young and good-looking, and unlike your fellows, you don't spoil your life with stuff like alcohol." "I haven't had a lot of bad luck in life like others," Andy said, becoming serious. "Many people who drown their sorrows in alcohol have seen a lot, and it's not for you or me to judge them." "I see," Marilyn smiled awkwardly, realizing her gaffe. "You may not believe me, but I'm interested in you. You don't look like a homeless person. You look good, like a normal person. I didn't mean to offend you." She immediately managed. "I apologize for the careless words." Andy didn't understand what was going on. Why was some rich woman interested in him? Why praise him or apologize to him? Such a thing was almost uncharacteristic of people in her circle. Andy had met with such people before. They did not count the homeless as people and treated them as if they were garbage. However, Marilyn, she behaved differently. She was different. "I was struck by how conscientious you are," Marilyn continued. "People like you bring back the faith that things can still be fixed. People don't dare to support volunteers. They think that charity is a scam and that the organisers are just pocketing their money. Now I see my donation is going to a good cause. I wanted you, as the most conscientious among your friends, to encourage them to live a normal life. If you get a job and get cured of all addictions, I thought it would be a great example and encouragement to them." Andy knew that some of the wealthy sponsors were involved in supporting volunteer organisations only for the sake of their own image or tax reduction, but they did not interact directly with the homeless. Marilyn seemed smart and sensitive, and it was even strange that a woman dressed so daringly could sympathise with someone and genuinely be eager to help the underprivileged. "Would you mind going out to lunch with me?" Marilyn brought him back to reality. "Everyone is looking at us here, and I'd like to get to know you better." Andy was confused because Layla, who was standing nearby, heard her words. He looked at his friend, afraid that she would be against his walk with Marilyn, but Layla only nodded with a barely perceptible smile. Even if she was jealous, she had no right to forbid him anything. With a heavy heart, Andy decided to go with Marilyn to the cafe. In a gorgeous red car, he was afraid to touch anything. Marilyn drove confidently but smoothly. Even though her companion felt timid next to her and was well-groomed and well-to-do, it did not matter to her. She did not treat Andy with condescension. Soon Marilyn parked in front of a chic establishment with glass windows. Inside there were round tables with lamps hanging low over them. Each of them was covered with a white tablecloth and a vase of fresh flowers on top. Cosy sofas were with velvet cushions. Andy had never been near such establishments. Their employees usually chased away vagrants, so they wouldn't dare bother their well-to-do customers. "This place is delicious. You'll love it," winked Marilyn. "I'm sure I will," the man muttered, his heart racing. Andy once again felt like a homeless kid who couldn't afford anything but a stiff bun and a glass of tea. "Don't worry," Marilyn remarked, seeing his confusion. "I've invited you, so I'm paying. It's not difficult for me, so choose whatever you like." The woman confidently called the waiter, ordering one dish after another. Just the names made Andy's stomach twist with hunger spasms. Soon several plates with various dishes and glasses of red wine could hardly fit on the table. "Shall we drink a little to get acquainted?" Marilyn suggested. "I'm not a fan myself, but a good drink will relax you." "Thank you, I don't drink," Andy objected, but still gave in to the entreaties. He didn't feel comfortable forcing Marilyn to fuss with him. The wine really distracted Andy from his anxious thoughts. He was able to forget about his position and Marilyn's status. The conversation flowed easily, and the topics came up naturally. It was a long time since he had felt so free when talking to someone who was an outsider. "You look a lot like my ex-husband, David," she shared. "True, in character you are quite different. I loved him very much and did not notice the obvious. He was a womanizer and a traitor," said Marilyn sadly, looking away. "He cheated on me with his secretary. Can you imagine? And she got pregnant. I didn't even know he wanted a child until his girlfriend showed up at our apartment. She started telling me how long David had been cheating on me with her, that he was afraid to divorce me. I was shocked. Marilyn stopped trying to suppress the tears. Andy was struck by her frankness. A glass of wine had had an effect on her. "I'm sorry this happened to you. Even though I've only known you for a couple of hours, you don't deserve to be treated like this. I don't understand why people can't be honest with each other. Why can't people work things out humanely? Admit you're in love with someone else and then ask for a divorce. Things happen in life, I know, but it's important to be human. I may disappoint you, but I want to get back at him. It hurts me to accept betrayal, and you can help me." Marilyn looked at him pleadingly. "Please listen. Nothing serious will be required of you. I just want to introduce you to my friends and attend a couple of events together as if we are in love. I want people to see us together, you know? I want people to realize that I'm not alone anymore, that I haven't grieved long after my divorce, and I've already moved on." "What kind of fiancé am I? Look at me. I don't belong in high society, and my manners are so bad, I will definitely give myself away." Andy was frightened. Now he understood why Marilyn had paid attention to him. "It's not a problem. With my money, I'll fix you up in no time. You'll look like a noble. I only need to post pictures with you on social networks to let everyone know about us, and nothing else. It won't affect you at all, and I really need it." Andy didn't like the idea at all, but the wine confused his thoughts. He couldn't agree, but he also couldn't refuse. Marilyn was very persistent. She looked at Andy so tearfully that he gave in. "Okay, I'll go along with it, but not for long. I'm not losing anything, am I?" he replied with a sigh. "That's right, sweetie. You'll even like it." She winked at him. Since Andy had agreed to help, he had a new life. At first, that same day, he went to the hospital for a medical checkup. "Don't take offence, it's better for both of us," insisted Marilyn. "I want to know who I'm letting into my home." "I understand. I'm not offended at all, because that's actually good for me. It's been a long time since I've been to a doctor. I don't have access to such an examination." Marilyn's house turned out to be gorgeous. It was a 2-story modern house, furnished with the latest technology. Inside, there was no unnecessary decor. Everything was in its place: comfortable furniture, fine pile carpets, and light-coloured walls. "Wow, did you really earn it yourself?" Andy gasped, not thinking that he was asking an indecent question. "You're funny," she laughed, seeing nothing special in her luxury. "I inherited money from my parents, so I don't have to worry about it. Choose any room on the 2nd floor. Everything is prepared for your comfort. You can use all the appliances and take whatever you want from the fridge. I'm away a lot, so you'll have to find your own entertainment. There's a pool in the backyard. You can swim." Collapsing onto the wide bed with the orthopedic mattress in his new bedroom, Andy couldn't believe his luck. Had he really gotten himself into such a mess? And would he at least live a luxurious life for a little while? Marilyn turned out to be very kind and attentive to him. For an orphan who had escaped from an orphanage many years ago, such an arrangement seemed incredibly surreal. Andy remembered perfectly his hungry childhood when he first found himself on the streets. They tried to involve him in many illegal activities, but his intuition had saved him many times from danger. Even though he did not like to be involved in dubious things, he was ready to help Marilyn. Meanwhile, she took good care of Andy. She started taking him to beauty salons for manicures, pedicures, and spa treatments to improve his skin and body. She even made him do sports with a personal trainer. "I feel like a Hollywood star," Andy often repeated when he was surrounded by lots of beauty specialists and Marilyn critically examined their work. "This must be like a movie scene for you," Marilyn smiled kindly at him. "We'll stop by my ex-boyfriend's hairdresser today. We need to fix your unruly hair." At the barber shop, there was a conflict that made Andy question Marilyn's true character. When the barber started shaving Andy's temples and the back of his head for a trendy haircut, leaving long hair on top, Andy protested. "It doesn't suit me at all. Do modern men really walk around like this? I do everything you ask, but this haircut is absolutely ridiculous." "It's necessary for business." Marilyn cut him off, not willing to hear any further objections. "But it's my body, isn't it? The reflection I see is not me. I don't like it. I don't want to be a laughingstock." "Andy, don't argue. The haircut will be how I want it, and you'll just have to deal with it," Marilyn replied with irritation, reading something important on her phone. This statement offended Andy. Despite Marilyn apologizing for her harshness on the way home, he couldn't shake off the feeling that she was hiding something. He didn't fully believe her words. An unpleasant feeling started to grow inside him. Perhaps Marilyn had a clear plan in which he was just an unwilling pawn. Andy shared his suspicions with Leela. At first, it was not easy for him to communicate with her. Considering he was living in the house of an attractive stranger, he felt guilty about something and didn't want to impose. "This whole thing seemed suspicious to me from the start," Leela said. "What do you mean?" Andy frowned like a child. "You see, rich women don't usually need—" "Homeless? I know, without reminding you, that I'm not her equal. For your information, I'm not trying to marry her," Andy replied, feeling offended. Leela quickly tried to calm him down. "Andy, you know that's not what I meant. It's not about you, it's about her. People like her can't be trusted. People like her are dangerous. Be on your guard. You never know what she's plotting." Leela said the last word with disdain, which didn't go unnoticed by Andy. "I miss you. I miss our conversations so much," he confessed suddenly. "As soon as I finish with her request, we'll meet right away," Andy promised and felt relieved after talking to Leela. He no longer believed everything he saw or heard. Instead of arguing with Marilyn, he became more compliant and immediately agreed to her ideas. But now Andy started to secretly observe her when she wasn't looking. He tried to eavesdrop on her phone conversations to learn more about Marilyn as a person. If she wanted to introduce him to her and David's friends, why hadn't anyone close to her come to her house during this week? Why all the secrecy? Andy wanted to be cautious and not make a fool of himself. If Marilyn posed any danger to him, he had to find out. One day, Andy was looking in the kitchen for a mixer to make dinner and accidentally found the receipts for the house rent in one of the cupboards. He was extremely surprised. Wasn't the house really Marilyn's property? Why had she lied to him? Why does she need such a big house for herself if she doesn't even bring anyone to it? It didn't go unnoticed by Marilyn that Andy had found the letter from the landlord. After dinner, she knocked on his bedroom door and offered to talk over a glass of good wine. "I have something to tell you," she confessed guiltily. "I understand you need an explanation. I'm not as rich as I said I was. David and his mistress fooled me, but I wasn't ashamed to admit it, even to you. I rented this house because I can't afford to buy one yet, and all my friends are fake. They're just gloating. That's how it is in this world, and I didn't want to seem abandoned or broken. I couldn't let David humiliate me like that. I really need you. I shouldn't have kept it from you, but please stay. Marilyn looked at him pleadingly. He didn't know what to say. He felt ashamed that the girl before him was justifying herself while he had suspected her of insincerity. She trusted him, and he had betrayed that trust. I'm the one who needs to apologize to you. I had no right to snoop around your house and invade your privacy. I'm sorry, but you can count on me. Later, when Andy recounted his conversation with Marilyn to Layla, she got angry. Andy, she's leaning on you. I'm really worried about you, Layla said in desperation, trying to awaken her friend's suspicion. We had an honest, open conversation, and now I have a different opinion of her. Marilyn won't do anything bad to me. She herself is going through a betrayal and has sunk almost to the bottom. Since then, Andy and Marilyn's relationship has changed. They began to spend more time together as friends, not just companions. They even did household chores together. Marilyn stopped pretending that she could afford to pay a cleaning company regularly. Gradually, Andy became less embarrassed about his background and felt more confident when interacting with new people. He observed how Marilyn communicated with staff in restaurants and conducted business over the phone. He saw how demanding she could be, and he also wanted to grow up and earn the respect of others. Maybe, after meeting me, you'll be able to realize yourself in society, she said with a smile, teaching Andy about manners. Don't slouch, that doesn't attract anyone. And don't smile like a fool. You should exude power, wealth and confidence. Currently, you look like a boy. You need to create an image for yourself and follow it. Then people will start taking you seriously. You're smart, Andy admitted, although he often found Marilyn's lectures boring. According to her, he did everything wrong. Marilyn criticized his habits, facial expressions, and the positions of his hands and feet. She demanded that he replicate everything exactly as she did. One day, Marilyn woke Andy up early. I need your help, she said, almost crying. I ask of you because I won't be able to do it myself. Yes, I'm listening, Andy responded as he stretched and got up from the comfortable bed. I need you to go to the bank today to withdraw some money. David and I shared an account. When he left for his mistress, he withdrew all the money without my knowledge and then boasted to me that he had hidden it safely in his safe deposit box. That's precisely what I need your help with. I just want the justice to prevail. I want you to take my half of the money. I don't want his money, but he had no right to take my half and leave me with nothing. You have nothing to fear. You're an exact copy of David. They know you well at this bank because you are their VIP client. Look, I just want to punish David for ruining me and our love, and taking his money is the best revenge. Okay, I'll try, Andy agreed, but he felt very uncomfortable inside. But he couldn't refuse Marilyn because he felt he was internally indebted to her for all her efforts and good attitude. Keeping everything Marilyn taught him in mind, Andy entered the bank office. Good afternoon, David. It's been a long time since you've visited us. Mr. Cox, the head manager, greeted him. Hello, I've had some matters to attend to, Andy answered, taking off his sunglasses with a deliberate gesture as Marilyn had taught him. I'd like to check my safe deposit box. Of course, David. Just please provide the passphrase. We trust you, but we've increased security due to a risk in fraud. Everyone, even our most important and valued clients, must go through this procedure. Mr. Cox obligingly spoke with a broad smile. Andy couldn't hide his surprise. Marilyn hadn't warned him about a passphrase. What was it, anyway? Suddenly, Andy felt a knot in his stomach. He realized that something was not going according to plan. I need to make a phone call, Andy said, reverting to being the awkward boy and vagabond he had been years ago. At that moment, Mr. Cox, who suspected something was wrong, pressed the panic button. Marilyn didn't answer the phone. Andy started sweating, noticing how other bank employees were squinting at him. Suddenly, someone approached him from behind and a stern voice said, "Stop where you are. Hands behind your head." Before Andy knew it, he had been restrained. His expensive cell phone fell to the glossy floor. From a nearby parked car, Marilyn watched as Andy was led out of the bank building in handcuffs and placed into a police car. She pressed her lips together in frustration, realizing that the plan had failed. Now she could only hope that the police wouldn't connect her to the vagrant who had attempted to gain access to the millionaire's safe deposit box. "What's going on? Where are you taking me?" Andy struggled in the hands of the police. "I haven't done anything wrong." "You're accused of fraud," said a stern voice belonging to the investigator. Detective Benson specialized in scams and fraud, and his team always reacted quickly to such calls. Alarm buttons in banks often saved people from grand theft and sometimes even saved lives. "So," Detective Benson began in the interrogation room, "you have no documents with you. Your name doesn't tell us anything either. Who are you? I want to warn you, you may have big problems if you continue to claim that you know nothing." "But I'm really not a scum, and I didn't mean any harm. I came to collect money that rightfully and justly belonged to the deceived wife. Her name is Marilyn, and her last name... God, I don't even know her last name." Andy panicked even more. "She said it's an ordinary procedure. I didn't know it wasn't allowed, and I didn't know I was doing anything illegal. I would never have overstepped the law." Mr. Cox, who was watching the interrogation from the other side of the glass in the meeting room, explained to another policeman, "He's lying. This crook is dressed exactly like our client David Rutherford. The thing is, they really look alike. And he even copied his gestures, manner of speech, and style of dress. It's a clear fraud. It's just outrageous. What a fool you have to be to try something like this." "Mr. Cox, calm down. The theft has been prevented thanks to your vigilance." Meanwhile, Andy was completely confused. He began to recover from the shock, and his consciousness started to piece together what had happened. Marilyn had set him up. Leela was right. It was impossible to believe. From the very beginning, she had paid attention to him for a reason, but because of his resemblance to some millionaire. She was cruel, calculating, mean, and ruthless. Until your mysterious Marilyn is found, you are Andy, the main suspect. I advise you not to hide anything from me. As far as I know, there's no one to vouch for you. Your past lifestyle does not inspire any confidence." Andy deeply regretted that he had fallen for Marilyn's assumed kindness and tearful story. Andy knew perfectly well that people like him had bad endings in situations like this. Leela was horrified when she heard what had happened. She was alarmed that Andy had stopped contacting her. She didn't know where he lived because Marilyn was against visitors, and during the time that Andy had been at her house, Leela had not seen him. They were only connected by phone calls, which have stopped now. Leela couldn't find peace. She knew that something had happened to Andy, and soon there was a call from the police station. "My God, Andy, are you all right? Did they hurt you there? Did they force you to sign a confession?" Leela couldn't stop asking. She was relieved that she could at last hear his voice. "I'm all right, relatively," Andy answered weakly. "I'm scared, although I know men don't admit to such things. I'm a poor man. No one will believe me. The cops are just trying to frame me, close the case and get a bonus." "You need a good lawyer, but where can we get the money?" Leela grabbed her head. "I'll borrow some. I'll ask the guys from the centre to take part in it, and we'll get you out. I won't let them put you in jail," she repeated through her tears. Soon, Leela came across an article on the internet from the city community, which stated that a homeless man pretended to be a millionaire to empty his safe deposit box. She couldn't believe her eyes when she saw a picture of that wealthy man, who looked extremely similar to Andy. After finding out more about David Rutherford, Leela learned that 4 months ago he had been in a terrible accident and fell into a coma, and soon she appeared on the doorstep of his parents' house. "Get away from here. Another journalist is looking for sensationalism," David's father shouted at her. No, I'm not a journalist. That's why I'm here. Please listen. Your son has a twin brother, and he's in prison. There has been a terrible mistake. An innocent man may go to prison for someone else's crime, and he may be your son." Something in Leela's words made Mr. Rutherford stop, and he allowed her to enter. "David was not our biological child," Mrs. Rutherford said, wiping her tears with a handkerchief. "We adopted him when he was 2 years old. We had no idea that he had a brother." David's adoptive parents looked at the pictures of Andy on Leela's phone and could not believe their eyes. "So it's true, then? The man they detained at the bank isn't a professional con man?" "I swear, Andy is a very good man, but he's too naive. No one can help him but you. If you knew him personally, you would never believe he would do such a thing. He has lived most of his life on the streets, but he has never stolen, and shares the little money he has with his friends and leads an honest life. Such people are rare among the homeless, believe me." The compassionate hearts of Mr. and Mrs. Rutherford trembled. They decided to visit the police out of curiosity to see David's potential brother. "My God, they really look identical," sobbed Mrs. Rutherford when she saw Andy. "Honey, we have to get him out at any cost. He seems to be the only relative of our David. We cannot let him be treated like this." "But we don't know what kind of a person he is. Leela's story is not enough. I can see that she is genuinely concerned about him, but that's not the main thing," Mr. Rutherford replied. After the conversation with the investigator, many things became clearer for the Rutherfords. So far, Andy is the only suspect. Marilyn, who, according to him, is behind the Rutherfords, could not be found. She made a donation to a volunteer centre for the homeless, but her details turned out to be false. She was obviously well prepared, and the fact that Andy knew nothing about her except her name made it even harder. The investigator said. "So Andy is just a pawn, right?" Mr. Rutherford clarified. "We'll hire the best lawyer for him and get him released on bail. While you're working tirelessly, an innocent man is sitting behind bars, and the real swindler is walking free." Andy spent about another week in jail, and then he was released on bail. When Andy was released, Leela threw himself around his neck right in the courtroom. "Thank God you're free now," she clung to her friend. "I was so worried. I couldn't eat or sleep." "Thank you for believing in me, and thank you for not giving up on me. I was such an idiot to fall for the fairy tales of a beautiful life. I don't need anything without you." "There seems to be something we don't know." Mr. Rutherford coughed tactfully into his fist. Leela quickly stepped back from Andy and adjusted her clothes. "Andy, these are your alleged twin brother's parents. They are the ones who got you out from behind bars." Thank you so much." Mrs. Rutherford couldn't help but hug Andy, as if he were her own son. "We are overjoyed that you are now free. We didn't know you existed." She and her husband offered Andy a place to live in the house where David had grown up. At first it was awkward for them to communicate, but they overcame it. They showed him pictures of his brother and told him about his life growing up. "I didn't know about David's existence. Why wasn't I told anything? I was too young to remember him. Why were we separated?" Andy wondered. He was amazed at how differently his and his brother's lives had turned out. "We should talk to the headmistress of the orphanage. She is quite active and is aware of the lives of her students," Mrs. Rutherford suggested. "I don't know if it was legal for them to keep you from us, but what she did was inhumane. She deprived you of the opportunity to grow up in our family. We would have taken both of you. David was such a lovely baby." Mrs. Morland, the director of the orphanage, was about to leave her office. It was clear that she took personal pride in the successful lives of her pupils and graduates. One wall was adorned with portraits of accomplished persons, including David Rutherford. Throughout her many years in this position, Mrs. Morland had witnessed a great deal. She believed that she was doing an excellent job by pursuing what she considered to be the right policies. When David's parents entered her office, she immediately recognized them, but mistook Andy for David. "I'm very proud of your son," she said in an ingratiating tone, knowing that there were wealthy people in front of her. "David, you were such a clever boy." "Thank you, but I'm Andy, the very twin brother whose existence you didn't inform these people about. You illegally separated me and my brother." "Good heavens!" cried the headmistress, already struggling to bear the shocks of life, and collapsed into her chair. Grasping her heart, she wailed, "How could this be? Did fate try to bring you two together?" "Exactly, fate. There's no other way to put it," replied the angry Mrs. Rutherford. "I heard what happened to your David, but I thought he had recovered. What a tragedy. But at least now the family is all together." Mrs. Morland tried to salvage the situation. "You've almost lost one son, but gained a second. God is watching over your family." "How could you live peacefully knowing that you had ruined one child's life? Why did you keep him from us?" Mrs. Rutherford persisted. "We could have given him a better life. He wouldn't have had to wander the streets feeling so lonely. He had a brother, his own flesh and blood, and you took that away from him." Forgive me, Mrs. Morland cried, taking her hand. "I have done this to other children too. Many families before you refused to adopt both siblings, so both stayed with us. But I wanted to do what was best, to give at least one of the brothers a chance to find a family. I understand how tragic your fate was after you ran away. I understood you were wandering the streets, but please forgive me. I am guilty before you." Mrs. Morland's tears were interrupted by a phone call. "It's my daughter. She's waiting for me downstairs. I'm just about to leave. Joan and I are in a hurry to catch her train. She's going to the capital on a business trip. I have to end our conversation. I'm really sorry." When Andy, accompanied by Mrs. and Mr. Rutherford, went outside, he froze in place. Standing next to the silver car was Marilyn. Only her hair was different, no longer dark and short. A light breeze was gently blowing through her long blonde strands. As soon as their eyes met, Marilyn started running. "Stop!" yelled Andy, startling David's parents. "Stop, you evil woman!" "Andy, where are you going?" shouted Mrs. Rutherford after him. Marilyn ran as if she were mad, but Andy was faster. He grabbed her arm, threw her to the ground, and held her down with his foot to prevent her from kicking. "I've got you, you swindler! Now you'll pay for everything!" Mrs. Morland, witnessing the scene, shouted in an unrecognizable voice. "What do you think you're doing? Quickly, let go of my daughter! Get your hands off her!" "She's your daughter?" Andy was surprised, looking into Marilyn's eyes, which were filled with tears. The police officers who arrived took Joan and Mrs. Morland with them, while the Rutherfords and Andy went to the police station in their car. "Now she won't escape," Andy said with indignation. Mrs. Rutherford held his hand, understanding the emotions he was experiencing. "Everything will be all right. The police will sort it out. She won't get away with it." Leela rushed to the police station as soon as she heard what had happened. Joan was taken in for questioning. Andy and his friend went outside to get some fresh air and clear their heads. "Don't think I've gone mad," Andy said softly, "but I wouldn't have been able to endure all of this if it weren't for you." "I couldn't act in any other way. You know that," said Leela. Andy took her hand and interlaced his fingers. "I know how you feel about me. You figured out your feelings a long time ago, and I had to go through all of this mess to admit it to myself. Leela, I like you. I really like you, and not just as a friend, but as a woman. I'm sorry I didn't realize it sooner, and you had to wait so long." Leela, feeling embarrassed, buried her face in Andy's shoulder instead of answering. Being by Leela's side, Andy no longer worried. knowing that she genuinely cared about his well-being. Meanwhile, during the investigation, a fearful Joan realized the gravity of her actions. She discovered that Andy was not just a homeless man, but had the support of a millionaire family behind him. "So, Joan, you're the missing part in this story, right?" Detective Benson asked sternly as he sat down opposite her. "You were captured by the cameras at the volunteer centre on the day you met Andy. Additionally, you were recorded by the car's video recorder near the bank on the very same day when Andy, acting on your tip-off, attempted to access the contents of David Rutherford's safe deposit box." The investigator's harsh tone and the oppressive atmosphere of the interrogation room brought Joan, who was already emotionally unstable, to tears. "Yes, it's me. Andy had no idea. I don't want him to get hurt because of me. I didn't realise how serious it was. I know it sounds foolish. I understand that it's illegal, but I got confused at the moment and I acted on impulse," Joan confessed. The woman went on to provide a detailed story. "I worked in a cafe opposite that bank office, and I saw David Rutherford many times because he used to come in for coffee. One day my mother, who worked as the headmaster of the orphanage, told me terrible news about one of her wards, who had been adopted many years ago. She showed me his picture and I recognised David. Then my mother told me in confidence that he had a twin brother who had run away from the orphanage many years ago and had never been found. I didn't have any plans, but I decided to look around the shelters, and one day I saw Andy. That's when I had this stupid plan. I don't know what came over me. Something just kind of messed with my mind. Now I sincerely repent for what I did," Joan revealed. "I rented a cottage and a car to match my image as a wealthy girl. It was surprising to see how kind and polite he was. I had expected him to be dumb and drunk like a cork. I had prepared the story of the ex-husband in advance and rehearsed it in front of the mirror multiple times to sound convincing. I even learned how to cry on command. It wasn't difficult to charm Andy. He's truly a kind-hearted guy, sensitive but also very naive. He seemed like he had resigned himself to his homeless life. At some point he began to suspect that I was leading him on, but I played on his sympathy, melting his heart once again. In a way, we were in similar situations. He was living without a home, and I was supposedly deprived of it by my ex-husband." A criminal case was opened against Joan, and all of her testimonies were thoroughly examined. As a result, Andy was finally cleared of all charges. Joan awaited her first hearing while Andy and Leela spent most of their spare time at David's hospital. "Sometimes I'm scared by how similar you two are. Do you think he will wake up?" Leela asked in a hushed voice, brushing her hair away from David's forehead. "I really hope that you two recognize each other. Judging by his parents, you can tell they raised him to be a good man." "Yes, the kind of man who makes millions in his 29 years, Andy exclaimed. "He'll make me feel like a failure." "That's not true," Leela interrupted. "Don't ever talk about yourself like that. You haven't lived his life, and he hasn't lived yours. Please keep in mind that he grew up surrounded by love and affection, while you only received hardships from fate." As the lovers argued, David twitched his finger. His eyelashes fluttered, and his pulse quickened. "Oh my God, he's opened his eyes!" exclaimed Leela, and David quickly pressed the button to call the medics. A nurse rushed in and began to soothe David while monitoring his vitals. "David, you're in the hospital. Welcome back. You're awake from your coma," the nurse informed him. "Who is he?" wheezed David, pointing a trembling finger at his double. "You'd better leave," the nurse requested. But when Mr. and Mrs. Rutherford arrived at the hospital, they filled David in on everything. "I missed so much news." The man weakly smiled at his parents. Occasionally he glanced at his brother, hesitant to speak openly to him. "Don't be afraid of me. I'm used to having a twin, and this is a new experience for you," Andy said to David. "If it's difficult for you, I can stay away for a while. You have a lot to discuss with your family." No, stay. I just need to get used to it." After a thorough check for any lingering effects from the coma, David was deemed healthy, but he still needed some time under medical supervision. Every day his parents visited him, and now his brother and fiancé had joined them. "I hope you'll accept me as your best man," David winked at Andy after being discharged. "I'm as active now as I was before. I can sing and dance." "Of course, no one is closer to me than you." Soon Andy embarked on a new and fulfilling life. Having endured so many hardships, he hadn't expected things to turn out this way. He had a cosy, spacious house. David's parents treated him like their own son, and most importantly, he had Leela, who sincerely loved him. He had proposed to her quite unexpectedly after another shift at David's bedside while he was still in a coma. "I want to spend my whole life with you. I can't imagine being with any other girl," Andy confessed to his beloved during a walk along the embankment. "I love you very much. Please, Leela, be my wife. I promise you won't regret it." When Andy presented a modest ring in a blue velvet box, she cried out, "God, of course, yes, I agree." With a shaking hand, Andy slipped the ring onto Leela's finger and kissed her hand. From that moment on, they were inseparable. Only their closest friends were invited to their wedding. Many volunteers who knew Andy and Leela toasted to the happiness of the newlyweds. They also invited some homeless people to the wedding, ensuring they looked presentable. "I'll never forget where I was raised," Andy vowed to them, and he kept his word. Very soon David brought him into the business. They worked together seamlessly, finishing each other's sentences and anticipating each other's actions. They complemented each other perfectly in their work and surprised each other with their ideas. Of course, this did not happen immediately, but thanks to the fact that David paid for his brother's education and personally trained him. Now, Andy, receiving a decent salary, regularly made donations to the Familiar Volunteer Centre. As for Leela, she didn't give up her voluntary work. Together, the couple organised dinners for the homeless during major holidays, providing everyone with useful gifts. At one of these events, Leela introduced David to her kind and sweet colleague, Holly. From then on, David became a frequent guest at the centre. The train was moving fast and beautiful landscapes were passing by outside the windows. There were still 8 hours of travel ahead of Amber, but she was already mentally at home. Her business trip had been reduced in a few days, and as soon as she heard the news, she hopped on the first train that would take her back to her hometown and her beloved husband. What luck, Amber thought. Tonight I'll be home and we can celebrate our little anniversary together. Miles will be so surprised to see me on the doorstep. I'm right not to call him. Let it be a real surprise. It's okay if he's not prepared for a romantic atmosphere. I can surprise him myself. I'll buy candles and rose petals, just like in the movies, leading from the bathroom doorstep into the bedroom. And I should also get a bottle of wine that will make us a little dizzy. Amber loved her husband with the same reverence she had felt years ago. It was their 5th wedding anniversary today, but in reality, they had been together for over 10 years, since high school. As she gazed out of the train window, Amber fondly remembered how Miles had been when they first met. In the middle of their graduation year, a new boy had come to her class. His name was Miles, and at first sight, Amber didn't like him. He was brash and cocky, but he excelled academically. "What are you reading?" he asked her one day during recess. "You won't be interested," Amber replied defiantly. She didn't feel like discussing her favourite author with a newcomer. "And what makes you think that? Did you look at me and decide that I can't handle anything more challenging than a primer?" It turned out that Miles was well read, but Amber still dismissed him as a show-off and a braggart. "Do you know that Miles's parents died?" a friend told her one day. "He's living with his aunt now. He's lucky he wasn't in the car with them. Otherwise, he wouldn't be sitting here telling us stories about his happy childhood and travels. I heard they considered sending him to an orphanage. Luckily, his aunt agreed to take him in." After that conversation, Amber looked at Miles with entirely different eyes. Behind his tough exterior, She saw a poor orphan boy, and suddenly she wanted to get to know him better. His jokes no longer seemed meaningless, and his attention even became relatively enjoyable. About a month after their first meeting, Amber agreed to go out with Miles, and she never regretted it. Their first kiss, their first embrace. She knew she had fallen in love, and she carried that feeling with her throughout all these years. After high school, they both enrolled in the same college, never wanting to spend a single day apart. In their 6th year together, they got married. When Amber arrived at her station and got off the train, it was already 5 o'clock in the evening. It was getting dark early in the fall, and while she was shopping for everything she had planned, dusk fell. She couldn't find rose petals, but her bag contained fragrant candles, a bottle of French wine, and new underwear that would surely excite Miles. The anticipation of happiness was overwhelming. The front door was locked, but instead of ringing the bell, she simply opened it with her key. "I'll surprise him," Amber thought to herself, tiptoeing towards the bedroom. Miles was in the bathroom, humming to himself. Amber was about to open the door when her husband suddenly appeared on the threshold and almost slipped on the wet floor, clearly taken aback by the unexpected encounter. "What are you doing here?" His voice sounded unusually high-pitched. It was evident that Miles had lost control of himself due to the surprise, although he quickly tried to regain composure. "Amber, I'm so glad." Managing to recover from the surprise, he quickly approached her, awkwardly wrapping his arms around her and trying to pull her away from the bathroom. This wasn't the kind of reunion Amber had imagined, but she attributed her husband's abruptness to confusion and consternation at her sudden appearance. "I'm also overjoyed to see you. My business trip ended early, so I thought I'd surprise you. Are you upset that I showed up unexpectedly?" "Of course not. Come, quickly to the kitchen. I'll make you some coffee. We can sit and talk. You must be tired from the journey," Miles said, attempting to steer his wife away from the bathroom door. However, Amber, smiling, freed herself from his embrace. "Just a moment, I just got off the train. Let me at least wash my hands and freshen up a bit. Actually, it would be nice to take a shower or a bath before dinner." "Don't go in there!" Miles shrieked with fear. Amber frowned. It was the first time her husband had ever behaved so strangely. "Why? What's wrong with the bathroom?" "Everything's fine, I just don't want you to go in there right now." Amber found it so peculiar that she immediately wanted to open the door and see what her husband was hiding. "Don't be silly, Miles, I'm going to wash my hands. Are you going to tell me to wash and shower in the kitchen? There's a surprise in there." Amber heard a hint of desperation in her husband's voice, and she concluded that he had hidden her wedding anniversary present inside. "Well, go and get it. I'll wait here," she suggested. "There's no way to get it." "What's in there, after all?" Amber was getting anxious. She abruptly opened the bathroom door and was stunned. Rose petals were scattered all over the floor. The bathtub was filled to the brim with foam and more petals, and burning candles adorned the edges. Everything was exactly as she had imagined. "What is it?" She turned back to her husband, seeking an explanation. "This is the surprise I told you about," her husband replied with a slight hesitation. "But you didn't know I was coming early, did you?" Amber looked at Miles, unable to comprehend what was happening in their apartment. "But you see," Miles excused himself, "I was rehearsing our meeting. I wanted to see if it would turn out beautifully. I bought candles, filled the bathtub, created a fragrant foam, and decorated it with rose petals. I thought I would get in myself and see how it looked, to see if you would like it." Amber looked at Miles, torn between laughter and tears. The image of her husband, immersed in bubbles and petals during his rehearsal, made her burst into laughter. "Only you could have thought of that," she said amidst her laughter. "You know what? This is exactly what I had been dreaming of during the entire journey home. You can check my bag. I bought almost the same candles as you did, except I also got wine and a brand new set of lingerie. I hope you didn't buy lingerie for me, planning to try it on while I was away?" Amber laughed heartily, and Miles, gradually calming down, started to smile as well. Well, no, I didn't think of new underwear, but you know, I have an idea of why such a beautiful bath is going to waste. Let the rehearsal not go in vain. Lie down, rest from the road, and I'll go get a cake and some fruit right now." Without waiting for Amber to say anything, Miles grabbed his jacket and phone and rushed out of the apartment. Well, let it be so, the woman thought. Romance, of course, is not at all what I imagined, but let it be better than nothing. She undressed and sunk in the pleasant scented water covered with foam. Candles crackled rhythmically, their flickering flames soothing. Tired from the journey, Amber began to relax and even dozed off a little. She woke up to the sound of the front door. Miles returned from the store. Amber hurriedly got out of the water and, wrapping herself in a fluffy towel, went to her beloved, who was already preparing appetizers in the kitchen. In the hallway, she accidentally dropped his jacket off the hanger and, picking it up, noticed a velvet box had fallen out of its pocket. Amber carefully opened it and froze, amazed at the beauty of the ring that lay inside. The golden ring with a neat diamond was the most suitable gift for their wedding anniversary. "Miles, my sunshine," Amber thought with admiration. "What a luxurious gift! It must have taken you a long time to save up the money for it. We are not rich enough to afford such rings. But you did that for me. Well, I won't confess that I found it. Let it be a real surprise." Amber carefully put the box with the ring back in the jacket pocket and, as if nothing had happened, went to the kitchen. Miles had already set a light dinner. There were candles bought by Amber on the table, a cake and fresh fruits were placed nearby, and Miles, with a business-like look, uncorked a bottle of wine. It was clear that after the trip to the store, Miles calmed down and became as relaxed and cheerful as usual. Amber eagerly awaited the moment when he would finally give her the coveted velvet box. But for some reason, her husband did not rush to do it. Throughout the evening he joked and poured wine for Amber, and she could not understand why he was delaying the gift. Amber did not dare to confess that she had already seen the precious gift, thinking that in the hustle and bustle her husband simply forgot about it. Slightly disappointed, she went to bed. The most annoying thing was that Miles fell asleep before her, and therefore all dreams of a romantic night vanished like smoke. The next morning, Amber woke up and found that her husband had already left for work. Today she could stay at home and relax after a long trip, so she started cleaning the apartment. Miles's jacket was still hanging in the hallway. He left in a coat, apparently not remembering about the ring. Amber decided to take out the box again to admire the beautiful gift. To her great surprise, there wasn't any box in the pocket. Where could it have gone? The woman wondered. I'm sure I put it back. She checked all the pockets of the jacket again and couldn't find the ring. Amber sat on the couch, lost in thought, analysing all the events of the previous evening. The box was there, and the ring was there. I remember exactly what it looked like. Amber pondered. Besides, Miles was behaving very strangely yesterday. That fear in his eyes, the bath filled with rose petals, the hustle, the quick run to the store, even though I usually have to persuade him for half a day. It's all very strange. The woman waited for her husband to come home from work with a firm intention to have a serious conversation with him. But for some reason Miles was greatly delayed. At first he didn't answer the calls, and later it turned out and his phone ran out of battery and there was no charger nearby. He came home tired, looking like a stranger, and refusing dinner. Immediately went to sleep. What's happening to him? Amber thought. She couldn't sleep at night, and the next day an event happened that put everything in place. Where did you get that ring? Amber accidentally overheard a conversation between colleagues in the office. It's so adorable. What kind of stones are these? We had a small anniversary, 3 months since we started dating. I would have preferred something more expensive. You know my demands, but my boyfriend is still young. He doesn't earn too much, although he has prospects. Amber couldn't believe her ears and eyes. Her friend, Stephanie, showed their colleague the ring that 2 days ago had been in the pocket of Amber's husband's jacket. "Wow, what a beautiful ring," Amber said, approaching closer. "You're lucky, but why didn't you tell me that you were dating someone?" "Well, you know," Stephanie replied with a hint of shame. "I didn't want to jinx it." "That's strange. You used to run and tell me about your new boyfriends even before dating, at least a week," Amber exclaimed. "Is it that serious? Are you planning to marry him or something?" Without blinking an eye, Stephanie started bragging about how lucky she was with her new boyfriend, how caring and attentive he was, how much he loved her. Amber stared at her friend and couldn't understand how these two could do this to her. Stephanie and Amber had met in their early youth. Stephanie was only 17 when, taking advantage of her strict parents' temporary absence, she decided to go to a nightclub with friends. Unaccustomed to alcohol, the girl quickly got drunk and didn't even realize when her flighty friends disappeared. Amber was celebrating her graduation from college with her classmates. She noticed that a rather shady-looking man sat down next to the lonely, intoxicated girl, constantly pouring some kind of drink into her cocktail glass. Amber decisively approached the table and declared, "Hey, little sister, it's time for us to go. Our dad is waiting for us in the car." The unsuccessful suitor, startled, glanced at the several strong guys who had gathered around Amber and hurriedly retreated. "Dad? My dad?" the girl stammered in fear. "Where? In the car? What car?" "At your home. Do you remember where you live? Well, great. That means we'll go now." Amber called a taxi and took the girl home. Stephanie was feeling sick. She was very unwell, and Amber stayed by her side almost all night. Since then, despite the age difference, the girls have become friends, or rather almost like sisters. Amber, like her older sister, took care of Stephanie, who always needed the advice of her wise friend. The parents did not have time to take care of their daughter. The father worked a lot, and her mother, being naturally very jealous, constantly accompanied her husband on his numerous business trips, leaving her daughter alone. Amber prepared Stephanie for admission to the college, the same one she herself graduated from, and later helped her named sister with her studies. When Amber was getting married, she asked Stephanie to be her maid of honor. Sure, Stephanie had been a frequent visitor to Amber's family, but now, was she really the one who destroyed it all? During the lunch break, Amber approached her friend and calmly looked her in the eyes, saying, "You know, I saw this ring before. Do you want to tell me everything yourself?" Stephanie was taken aback, but immediately tried to compose herself. "You saw this ring? Where? At the jewelry store?" "No, in my husband's pocket." "So, you're saying you've been having an affair for 3 months now, aren't you? And all this time, I was wondering why they started sending me on business trips instead of you, almost every week. So I was away, and you and Miles were having fun behind my back." "I'm not going to explain anything to you." Stephanie suddenly changed her expression, her beautiful face contorted with anger. "Sort it out with your husband." With that, she turned around and quickly walked away. Amber was standing alone watching her go. How bitter it was to realize that the two closest people had stabbed her in the back. The pain of their betrayal was simply unbearable. Amber excused herself from work, claiming to feel unwell, and returned home. Stephanie had likely already called Miles and warned him, because he was already waiting for her at home. So, the surprise was for her. Rose petals, candles, a gold ring with a diamond. I apparently didn't deserve all this. What happened between us? Where did your love go, Miles? Is it really over? We dreamed of having a child. I dreamed of... Miles remained silent. For the first time in the past year, he took out a cigarette and smoked. The silence hung in the air, and a heavy weight burdened them. "Do you love Stephanie?" Amber tried to understand. "What attracted you to her? What can she give you that I can't? Did you fall for her father's money?" Miles remained silent, and Amber suddenly felt an overwhelming surge of hatred for him and her best friend. That's it! No more silence! Pack your things and get out of my apartment! Go to her place! Get out! I don't want to be around you any more. If you don't leave now, I'll do something to myself. I hate you for what you've done. You've betrayed all my dreams and hopes. You've trampled all the feelings I felt for you. Go, I beg you, or else one of us will die tonight. Amber sobbed in hysterics, while Miles silently packed his things. At one point, he tried to approach her and hug her to calm her down, but she recoiled from him like a leper. Go away, she screamed, like a wounded animal. Don't touch me. Miles picked up his bag, put on his jacket, and taking one last look around, walked out. As soon as the door shut behind him, Amber fell exhaustedly onto the bed and buried her face in the pillow, howling like a madwoman. She couldn't imagine how she would live without the one who had long ago become her only family, who had brought her joy for so many years, the one she had dreamed of having a child with. Her heart was broken. She was unable to show up at work soon, afraid of encountering Stephanie there. Therefore, she took a vacation at her own expense. However, as it turned out, Stephanie left the company the day after Amber kicked out her husband. She won't be lost without this job, the workers at the firm reasoned. Stephanie has money. She already bought a car for her boyfriend. But let's not say anything in front of Amber. She's feeling so bad. But Amber was aware of everything that was happening. She saw with her own eyes the happy couple driving past the office where the abandoned wife worked. That Miles seemed like a normal guy. What attracted him to Stephanie? Amber's colleagues wondered. Amber is such a smart, beautiful girl. She has everything going for her. What more do these men want? They've been together since high school. Maybe he got bored. You know how it is with people. They love each other and then they want something new. Yeah, or someone new, an older woman chimed in. My husband ran away with my neighbour. What was he missing? I'm a better homemaker than her, and I'm 5 years younger, and she's not beautiful at all. However, he's fed up with me. That's all. That's our fate as women, sighed another employee. Don't talk nonsense about fate. The man has strayed. Maybe he wanted an easy life. Amber should have waited a bit. Maybe he would have come to his senses. After all, they were married for years. It's a shame they don't have a child. Maybe then they would have stayed together. You're talking nonsense, another divorced employee interjected. And who's to say kids would have stopped him? I have 3, and where's their father now? He's raising someone else's children and doesn't even think about his own. So Amber is lucky she doesn't have a bunch of kids from this scoundrel. Regardless, all of Amber's colleagues felt sorry for her and sympathised with her. Amber was utterly dejected. She could hardly sleep at night, and as a result, she had bags and dark circles under her eyes. In just a few days, she looked as though she had aged 10 years. Well, that's not the way it's going to work, a young employee, Mary, finally decided. She had recently joined the team and was working alongside Amber. I can't bear to see you suffer. Don't take offence, I'm new here, and you have every right to send me away. But listen to what I have to offer you. I think you need something to keep you busy. 2 years ago, I went through a painful breakup with my boyfriend, and I even had terrible thoughts. But through the psychological help service, I met some good guys, volunteers. They helped me a lot back then. We meet several times a week to help people in need, the elderly, the homeless, and families with many children. All of our volunteers are young, cheerful, and kind-hearted. They are the kind of people you need to be around right now. Taking Mary's advice, Amber joined her volunteer group and soon realised that her colleague was right. Every day facing with human grief, she slowly forgot about her own troubles. Soon she felt like the man in the parable who complained about his lack of boots until he met someone who had no feet. After all, Amber thought, these two have found each other and deserve each other. And it's good that I now understand this and realize that for all these years I have been with insincere and false people. Now I know it. So why should I be sad about them, especially about Stephanie? Mary is simple, open and reliable, and I didn't notice her. Gradually, Amber's own pain seemed more insignificant to her, and she completely immersed herself in solving other people's more important problems daily. Someone needed to be fed. Someone needed to be warmed with hot tea. Someone needed medicine or a warm jacket. One old man had a flat shoe, and another had a festering leg wound. And one day, something happened that changed her life forever. Mary and Amber, as always, were helping to distribute food to the homeless when they noticed that a boy approached the crowd of homeless people, approached and started looking into their bowls. He was decently dressed, although his clothes were already worn out. "Have you seen him before?" Amber asked, nodding her head towards the boy who was about 7 years old. "No, he's a new kid. We often have kids from dysfunctional families come here. We already know them well. We provide them with clothes and shoes, and we bring them medicine and food. This boy doesn't look like a disadvantaged child. But he's obviously hungry. Look at the way he looks at the food, but he's afraid to ask for it. Maybe he ran away from home or got lost," Amber suggested. She put the ladle aside and decided to approach the boy. "Hello," she said cheerfully. The boy jumped in surprise. "Don't run away. What's your name?" "I'm Amber." "My name is Ian." "Ian, are you hungry? Come on, I'll feed you." The boy looked at Amber apprehensively. "Grandma told me not to take anything from strangers." "Your grandmother is extremely right, except that I'm not exactly a stranger. Many people know me here, and Ben can confirm it, for example." Amber turned to the elderly man, who was happily eating porridge. "Right, Ben, you know me, don't you?" "Well, of course. Don't be afraid, kid. We have good girls here. They won't harm us." Ian followed Amber, and taking a plate of hot food from her hands, started eating with warmth on both cheeks. "I wish I could take some to my grandmother. She's hungry too." He looked regretfully at the empty bowl. "What's wrong with your grandmother?" Amber decided to find out, as she was disturbed by the fact that a decent-looking child was wandering around the city so hungry. Ian was a little shy, but Amber managed to get the story out of him. It turned out that Ian's mum had recently passed away. The woman had been ill for a long time, and Amber suspected that it was cancer. After his mum's death, the boy was left to live with his elderly grandmother, but recently she had fallen ill, unable to get up. Now she couldn't take care of her grandson anymore, as she needed help herself. They had no other relatives, and the 7-year-old boy and his sick granny found themselves all alone and without any help. "At first a neighbour helped us a little, but she's gone now, and we've run out of money. I haven't eaten anything since yesterday, and my grandmother is hungry. I went to town thinking maybe I could ask for some money. I've seen people asking for money. Passers-by give it to them. But I noticed you were feeding people, so I came over." "Mary, may I go to Ian's house with him?" Amber suddenly suggested. "You'll manage here without me?" "Yes, I think they'll do even without me. Let's go together," she suggested. Taking some food, the women followed Ian to his house. The small apartment was not like those lodgings where homeless people lived. It had the love and care of its owners. The dust-covered dressers were carefully adorned with lace doilies, and a couple of 100 books languished behind glass in the bookcase. "Grandma says my mum used to read a lot when she was a kid," Ian explained, pointing to the closet. "She used to read a lot to me too. There are my books on this shelf, but now I don't have anyone to read them to me." Ian's grandmother was lying on the bed in her bedroom. Upon seeing the guests, she tried to get up and ask them something, but her speech was slurred. It was evident the woman was in poor health. "Don't worry," Amber hastened to reassure her. "We're volunteers. Your grandson found us. We've brought some food, and we'll make you something to eat now." The woman nodded in agreement and tears flowed from her eyes. She slurred something again, and Ian leaned closer to her, repeating her words loudly. Granny says she's ashamed to be lying down, but she's completely weakened. Granny apologises to you for her helplessness. Don't be upset. Everything will be all right now. We won't leave you in trouble, said Mary, as calmly as possible, although her trembling voice revealed her concern. The girls helped Ian clean the house, and together they prepared food and fed their grandmother. I'm afraid I'll be taken to an orphanage, Ian said sadly. They wanted to take me away before, even before my grandmother became ill, but she didn't give me away. And now she's sick, and I don't know what to do. Don't you have anyone at all? Amber realised that the elderly woman needed care herself. And here was a boy, just a child. Grandma said I have a daddy, but I've never seen him. The elderly woman gestured to Ian again and weakly said something to him. Grandma says there's a picture of Daddy in the album and asks you to find him. Ian pulled an old family album from the shelf. I remember. There's a picture of my daddy here. I'll show it to you now. The picture showed a young couple. They were both dressed in summer clothes and looked pleased. Mum said she met Dad when she was working as a camp teacher. They met at the sea. He was from another city. Wasn't my mum beautiful? Amber and Mary looked at the old photo and understood how difficult it was for a boy to be without his father and mother. Would you like us to find your daddy? They asked Ian. The woman realised that finding the boy's biological father would be the best thing they could do for him now. Probably, answered Ian timidly. Only he probably won't want to know me. He's never come to my birthday party. Ian, the grandmother weakly called her grandson. Come here, my good boy. Ian came and hugged his grandmother. Girls, I know his name, the woman admitted weakly. Please find him, in case something happens to me. I don't want Ian to be left all alone. His name is Joe Pierce. Amber wrote the name in her notebook and tried to reassure the elderly woman. We'll try to find him. If you allow us, we'll take this picture. Ian, don't worry. We'll be sure to return it to you safe and sound. With the surname and name in hand, and with an approximate year of birth, the girls quickly found him through social networks. It turned out that Ian's father was living in a neighbouring town. He was married, but apparently had no children. Well, judging by the photos from his social media, it's not a poor family, Mary said, shaking her head. Look at the mansion they're taking pictures in front of. And their cars are cool. And here are pictures from the islands, from resorts. And Joe's wife is obviously wealthy. She's all dressed up, with silicone breasts and pumped-up lips. Unlike you and me, right, Amber? I don't care about his wife. I wonder if he'll even want to listen to us. Or will he chase us away? Well, we won't know unless we go. We can't delay it, or Ian's grandma might get worse, and the boy will be left alone. The women decided to go to Joe's house without postponing the trip. One of the volunteers helped them with the address, since his brother worked in the patrol service and could look it up by the license plate number. But at the last moment, Amber had to go alone. I've twisted my ankle, Mary called her. Let's postpone it for a couple of days. I'll feel better and go with you. No need. I've already made up my mind and won't postpone, Amber said. Take care of your ankle. I'll call you in the evening. Amber quickly found the house where Joe lived. The mansion, which she had already seen in the photo, stood out among the neighbouring houses. However, she couldn't approach the house itself. The entire perimeter was surrounded by a high fence, with surveillance cameras hanging from the gate. Initially, Amber decided to wait, hoping that the owner himself would come out of the house so she could stop him and talk to him. But remembering that Ian was waiting for her help somewhere out there, she shook off her hesitation and rang the gate insistently. I need Joe Pierce for urgent private business, she declared firmly. Amber herself was surprised at how convincing her voice sounded. What kind of business? You could have just called instead of showing up at the house. The woman, apparently the housekeeper, answered on the other end of the line. It's urgent and can't wait. Just tell me if he's at home or not. Eleanor, I'll answer it myself. A male voice came. Good afternoon, young lady. What do you want from me? You are Joe Pierce? Amber asked to confirm, and upon receiving confirmation, she continued, Do you know the name Claire Sergieva? If so, please come to the gate. I have important information for you. A moment later, the gate in front of Amber swung open, revealing a handsome man in the opening. His face showed concern. I haven't heard from Claire in years. Why are you looking for me? He asked in surprise. Do you know you have a son? A look of disbelief crossed Joe's face. A son? Yes, you do. His name is Ian, and he's almost 7 years old now. Look, is that you in the picture here? That's the man the boy thinks is his father, and that's his mum. She died a year ago. Claire died? Oh my God, I didn't know. Wait, you're saying she had a child, a boy, who was 7 years old? When was he born? Amber was just about to answer when suddenly a woman appeared behind him. What's going on here? She exclaimed in a high and unpleasant tone. It was Beth, Joe's wife. Having seen from the cameras that her husband was talking to a strange woman at the gate, she hurried to deal with the situation. The woman was clearly older than Joe and looked slightly different from the photo on social media, but Amber recognized her nonetheless. Beth, it's for me, Joe calmly replied. I can see that, but what does she want? If they came to impose all sorts of nonsense on you, don't buy anything. Send her away. I've already finished talking. It's fine. Go back to the house. Joe discreetly took out a business card and slipped it to Amber. Call me a little later, he whispered, and then added it louder so his wife could hear. Thank you. I'm not interested in your offer. Amber immediately understood that Joe didn't want his wife to know about the conversation, so she didn't insist. She found a nearby cafe and, sitting comfortably at a table, dialed Joe's number. Half an hour later he arrived. So what's going on, after all? Explain it to me, he demanded. You see, I'm just a volunteer, and I don't really know your situation myself. I just decided to help the boy. The woman you dated 8 years ago gave birth to a boy. His name is Ian, and he's about 7 years old. The thing is, the kid is in a very difficult situation. His mother died, and he was left to live with his grandmother. But the old lady is very ill now, and Ian can't be left alone at any moment. I found out that he has a father and decided to find him. And my investigation led me to you. I'm very sorry for the boy. He is such a homely, beloved child, and it would be very scary if he goes to an orphanage. Ian is terrified of that. I first saw the boy when he looked into the bowls of homeless people because his grandmother was very sick and could not take care of him. At some point, they were left with no money at all, and Ian started to starve. We are helping them now. In the few days that I have known the family, the grandmother has slowly started to get back on her feet, but she has a heart condition. I can't guarantee that she won't go to bed again. Why, if the child has a father, should he go to an orphanage? I swear to you that I didn't know anything about my son, Joe said in desperation. I have not seen Claire for many years and had no idea that she was pregnant and had given birth to a child. You know, we had a little romance in the summer by the sea. When I came back to the city, I went to see her a few times, but we lived in different cities, and somehow it happened that the relationship came to naught. I liked Claire a lot, but my family wouldn't accept a girl like her. What was wrong with her? Amber didn't understand. When I started dating her, I didn't say I was from a rich family. I was so fed up with my university studies and my father's plans to send me to work for his companion abroad that I rebelled and ran away, determined to spend at least one summer doing what I wanted to do. I got a job as a simple counsellor and went without a penny of money to a children's camp by the sea. All the counsellors there were simple students, future teachers and kindergarten teachers, and just fun people. I had such an easy and fun time that summer. Among the other counsellors was Claire. She had just finished her 3rd year at the pedagogical college, and, like the others, she was happy to work at the sea camp. We sang songs around the campfire, went swimming in the evenings while the children slept, and eventually fell in love. I chose Claire, and she chose me. But the summer fairy tale couldn't last long. After a couple of months, I still had to leave for an internship in England, and when I returned 2 years later, I married Beth. I remembered Claire fondly, but I had no idea that our summer romance had given her a son. Tell me honestly, if you agreed to talk to me, does that mean that you don't mind seeing your son? Amber asked with hope in her voice. Give me their address. I'll try to get there as soon as possible, maybe the next day. What about your wife? She'll probably mind, won't she? Beth? Probably, yes. She's very jealous and likes to control me, but to be honest, I'm sick of this life. When I agreed to marry her, I went along with my father's wishes. Beth is wealthy, and her mother allowed my family to stay afloat during the crisis. She is a very selfish person who considers me her property. Beth categorically does not want children, while I, to be honest, dreamed of one. I really want to meet Ian, so don't worry, I will definitely come. Joe kept his word, and the very next day he called. Amber, are you free today? Maybe you can keep me company, because somehow I'm a little afraid of scaring the boy. After all, I've never seen him before, and it will be easier with you. Amber agreed to drive up at the agreed time, and together with Joe they went to Ian's house. I bought him some presents, Joe told her on the way. Do you think he'll like them? I've already forgotten what a 7-year-old boy needs. Don't worry, Joe. Ian is not a spoiled boy. He will be happy even with simple attention. And if you bring him presents, he will be happy. Remember, recently him and his grandmother had no food in the house. Ian met them at the doorstep and was pleasantly surprised, though a little frightened. Don't be afraid, Ian, the man said to him. Come, let's get acquainted. My name is Joe. Did you recognize me? Ian looked attentively at his father, but was afraid to speak to him. You're my dad, Ian suggested timidly. I've only seen you in pictures, and you look a little different there. You see? But you recognized me anyway. I'm different there because it was a long time ago, 8 years. Meanwhile, you've not only been born, but you've grown so big. You're really grown up now. Amber came to Ian, squatted down beside him, and looked into the boy's face. Dad came to see you. He only recently found out about you. I told him he didn't know. He really wants to meet you. Will you let us come into the room and talk to you and Grandma? Ian nodded in agreement, and Joe introduced himself to Ian's grandmother. The elderly woman was feeling better already, especially since the doctor, whom Mary had called, had visited several times. She began taking her medication and was slowly moving around the house. Grandma, my dad is here to see me, Ian joyfully announced. Daddy, come in, this is my grandmother. Sit down here. I'll put the kettle on now. Grandma nodded to Joe and quietly asked, Please sit down and we'll talk. And I'll go help Ian for now. Amber quickly seized up and left the room so as not to interfere with the serious conversation. Let's stay here for a while, she suggested to Ian. Let Dad and Grandmother talk. Your dad is a good man, and I think you'll like him. But he's in a bit of a difficult situation now, you know. He's married, but his wife is not very nice, like the stepmothers in fairy tales. Like Cinderella had, Ian guessed. That fairy tale is for girls. I'm not afraid of evil women. That's good, but I think your daddy is a little afraid of her. If he tells you he can't take you in yet, don't be offended. I'm sure you wouldn't want to live with her, either. When I saw her, I knew you wouldn't like her. But if Daddy comes to visit you, walks with you, and helps you and Grandma, that wouldn't be bad, right? I like it even better that way, the boy rejoiced. I don't know my dad yet, and I don't want to leave my grandmother. And if there's a wicked woman living there, then I definitely don't want to go. I'll tell Daddy to just come and visit me. I'll be glad. Well, let's go to them then, Amber decided. They're probably already waiting for us. And so it was agreed. Ian stayed with his grandmother, and Joe came to visit them from time to time. He brought medicine and food, bought clothes and toys. Sometimes he would spend a whole day visiting Ian. They walked together around the city, went to the park for amusement rides, and ate ice cream in cafes. In short, they did all those cool things that bring fathers and sons together. And Amber is nice. I miss her, Ian remembered about the woman. Amber had been visiting their house less frequently lately. She was finally able to return to work normally and was travelling on business trips again. I like Amber too, Joe admitted. Let's invite her to go out with us sometime on the weekend. I'm all for it, the boy rejoiced. She's just so kind and beautiful as my mum was. She did so much for me and my grandmother, and she found you and helped me. Let's be friends with her. Please, call Amber and tell her I miss her. Amber agreed to meet Ian and his father on the weekend. Ian, you've grown up. I haven't seen you for a month, she said, smiling and genuinely happy to meet them. So how are you? How is Grandma? Everything is fine with us. Dad bought all sorts of medicines and vitamins for Grandma. She even goes to the store by herself now. She says she'll start dancing again soon. Well, she's joking. I mean, what kind of dances can grandmothers do? I think, Ian, your grandmother will surprise you yet, Amber laughed. Then the woman turned to Joe and asked him, Well, how are you two doing? The man looked a little embarrassed. Yes, how are things? Little by little. We're going to buy a bicycle for Ian today. We called you to help us choose. Me? Amber was even more surprised and immediately laughed. Is this a joke? I've never ridden a bicycle in my life. How can I help you? Well, then you, Amber, will have to learn together with Ian, because I believe that everyone must know how to ride a bicycle. Can you imagine the picture? The three of us on bicycles rushing across a huge field. Yeah, you might be rushing, but I would immediately find a ditch and fall into it, Amber commented, choking on her laughter. There's no way I'm getting on a bicycle. Amber resisted, but the next time Joe arrived, the three of them were riding their brand new bicycles through the deserted alleys of the park. The woman kept falling, and Joe was laughingly catching her. Ian pedalled well and was terribly proud that he had learned to ride so quickly. Look, Amber, he shouted, do it like I do. Do you see? Trying to look at Ian, the woman lost her balance again, but she did not fall because she was picked up by Joe's strong arms. Something is wrong with my vestibular apparatus, Amber shamefully remarked. Well, that's probably enough for today, Joe said, glancing up at the sky. It looks like the storm is coming 3 hours earlier than the weather forecasters had warned. We've got to get ready to head back. When they arrived at Ian's house, the strong wind had already started to blow. A real storm was brewing. After saying goodbye to his son, Joe took Amber to her home. There, he volunteered to help her carry her bicycle to the apartment. But before they had gone 10 steps, there was a terrible clanging sound behind them. An old tree collapsed right onto Joe's car, and at the same moment the downpour began. There was no way to remove the huge tree or assess the extent of the damage to the car. Amber and Joe were soaked in a few seconds. Hurry into the house! Amber shouted through the noise of the thunderstorm, and they took hands and ran into the entrance. Why are you laughing? Amber shouted. His car's a wreck. He's wet, but he's laughing. He's having fun, she grumbled, turning the key in the door. I'm not laughing. I'm happy, Joe explained. What? Asked Amber with a gasp, though she understood perfectly well what he was glad about. She herself was glad of the way in which what was bound to happen had been accelerated by chance. The morning came, as usual after such a storm, sunny and gentle. Amber did not want to wake her beloved, but she had to do it. Quietly touching Joe's shoulder, she whispered in his ear, "Joe, I have to work in an hour. What do you like for breakfast?"
"For breakfast? I would like amber," replied Joe foolishly, pulling the woman to him.
That day she did not go to work, referring to the need to eliminate the consequences of the storm, and Joe texted his wife, "I had an accident. I'm fine, taking care of the car." The car was only slightly dented. By evening the tree had been removed, and Joe had got ready to hit the road. The day before he had made arrangements for a sanatorium for his son's grandmother and for Ian to a beautiful children's camp by the sea, where he had once met his mother. Amber was happy for both the grandmother and the boy, who had never been further from his town, but she realized that she and Joe had been parting for a long time, and she was sad. He would have no reason to come to their town in the near future, at least not until the fall. And that night, well, let it stay that way. She had no regrets. For the first time in her life, she felt how much tenderness a man could give to a woman. But she had no reason to be dishonest with herself. Amber fell in love with Joe at first sight. It was as if something hit her right in the chest, where, as many believe, the soul resides. As soon as he handed her his card and whispered, "Call me later." During the summer she often called Ian and his grandmother. They were both content and happy, though they missed each other and Amber. Joe called Amber a couple of times, telling her about his meeting with Ian at the camp on Parents' Day, and about the fact that he had managed to visit his grandma as well. "Amber, you can't imagine how tanned he is," the man joyfully informed the woman. "The whites of his eyes are shining on his face. He's learned to swim, and he dives like a dolphin. We were thinking about you. It's a pity you can't get a vacation. And it's far away, of course." "It's okay, I talked to him on the phone, and I'm glad he found friends there. Grandma isn't bored either. She's made some friends there and even has a man. She's made some friends there and even has a man. She even has a dance class, so Grandma will definitely surprise Ian. Thank you for everything, Joe." "Thank you? If it weren't for you, maybe my son would already be in an orphanage. How's your volunteering going, by the way?" "Well, we still go to our group on weekends with Mary. I have a new mentee, a family with many children, so I don't get bored." "I didn't even doubt it. You're an extraordinary woman. And what kind of family? Maybe I can help in some way too." Amber told him about her volunteer days. There was only one thing she kept silent about and did not dare to confess to him, that their only night of love did not pass without consequences. Yes, there were no candles or rose petals, as Amber had once dreamed. There were only two drenched people who warmed each other with their warmth. But there was the main thing, the result of this night. The suspicion of pregnancy, which arose in the woman just a couple of weeks after Joe's departure, was confirmed. "And what are you going to do?" persistently interrogated Mary, who had become the sole confidant in all Amber's affairs of the heart. "Me? I'm going to give birth, of course," Amber answered firmly. "But have you told him?" "No, of course not. No matter how I feel about his wife, whatever she is, they have a family, and I found myself in the role Stephanie was in towards me." "What kind of nonsense are you talking about? How can you compare that situation with the one you're in now?" "Well, situations are different, of course, and so are families, but I feel guilty. Let things go as they are, Mary. I'm not going to push Joe into some decision he hasn't made. Summer will end, Ian will come back, Joe will start coming to us again." But Joe arrived early. He found Amber where she and Mary were handing out food to the homeless. It was not quite usual, because before he came to Ian, and only in the middle of the week, he explained his absence to his wife as business trips. "Amber, look who's coming. A cheerful man with flowers." Mary tugged at her friend's sleeve. At the same time, she had to wrap both arms around Amber. The pregnant woman was pale and lost consciousness. She was seated on a bench next to a table with pots and a share of water. When Amber opened her eyes, she saw Joe's worried face in front of her. "It's nothing," Mary hurried to reassure the man. "In her condition it happens. She got overexcited. And it's time to stop volunteering. She's tired." "In what condition?" Joe was stunned. "Mary, why are you doing this?" Amber interrupted her friend. "What do you mean, why? Are you going to play the silent game forever?" A hunch flashed across Joe's face. "Amber, my love, is that what I was thinking?" "Joe, this doesn't change anything. I'm not going to break up your family," Amber replied evasively. "And you're not going to break up my family," Joe began in a deliberately stern tone. Amber's insides went cold. "Yes, this is the end," she thought. "The end of my brief happiness." Somewhere deep in her soul a glimmer of hope still remained. A hope that one day they would raise Ian and their baby together. But it was not meant to be. And Joe continued ruthlessly. "And you're right, it doesn't change anything." After a brief pause, he continued with a laugh. "Because there is nothing left to break or change. I have finalized the divorce, and now I have come to offer you my hand and heart." "But what about your house, your business?" Amber weakly objected. "It means a lot to you." "I realized that love and family are the most important things in the world," Joe said. "Even without my ex-wife, I'm not a poor man. It's time to move forward. Let's go and make Ian happy." Then he took a velvet red box out of his pocket, opened it, and taking out a delicate ring adorned with diamonds, got down on one knee. "Amber, my love, will you be my wife?" Amidst the cheers of volunteers, homeless people, and passers-by, Amber gave her consent to Joe. 2 days later, they were already by the sea. After obtaining permission from the camp management, they spent the entire day with Ian. As they approached the entrance to the children's camp, they saw a boy happily running towards them. "Oh, Amber has come too," Ian rejoiced. "And she agreed to be my wife," his father said. "From now on, you'll live with us, and soon you'll have a brother or sister." Ian was overjoyed. The 3 of them strolled along the promenade, basking in the summer sunshine and inhaling the sea air. They were truly happy and looked forward to the future with faith and hope.